the way, folks, happy Revenge of the 5th, and also happy Cinco de Mayo. Welcome on in. It is science news of the week, and we've got a bunch of, I think, fascinating science news stories to go over tonight. A bunch of different flavors of things, ranging from a topic and a word that freaked me out as a child because of the movie Mission Impossible 2. If y'all remember it, or I think it's Mission Impossible 2, there is this chimeric virus that's what Ethan Hunt has to stop. And so the chimeraisms were just like very freaky to me in terms of what that is and how that all worked into science. And so that's one of the topics tonight, but from a biological perspective. We also have a really cool genomics study. The genomics study is called, it's got a really interesting name, Zoonomia, the Zoonomia Project, which is just a really powerful tool that people have developed. We also have a news story on how hibernation works, and there was just a really interesting question about how the heck hibernation can happen, and they actually studied some bear genetics to figure out how it worked. And then there's also a really cool one on locusts, which we've tangentially touched on locusts before, and I was like, you know what, that sounds kind of cool. So we're gonna do a smidge on locusts tonight as well. And then there's, of course, others. There's lifespan stuff, bacteria, crabs, owls, beetles, you name it. There's a bunch of other topics as well. So folks, before we get started, I will start the prediction of how many topics y'all think we'll get through tonight. You never know what we're actually going to get through, because yeah, it's me behind the wheel, so it could be going pretty fast, or it could take a while. So glad to see you. Not late, Crux. I'm glad to have you here. Crux. I love your face, my friend. It's great. Hey, Crux, I enjoy that you also enjoy the little one photo so much. They actually just made it home. They were at Lita's mom's helping her with some car stuff. I'm not sure if baby Lona was out of the car, and she was also helping build things, but I wouldn't put it past her. That little girl, so there's, I don't know, for the parents out there, there's this thing called tummy time, where you have to put the baby on her tummy and see if she can lift her head, and that's how you start getting the crawl. So she hates tummy time when you put her on like a surface where she's supposed to crawl on. However, if I put her on my belly, if I lay down and put her on my belly, today she was doing such a good job of lifting her head, and like she pushed up her upper body with her little hands, like you on my chest. I was like, you're so powerful. I'm that kind of silly father already. It's fine. Beyond that, what was today? We had work went fine, but a bunch of random stuff got done, which is great. I did go get haircutted. And then we had someone come out today to look at the basement and the flooding situation. I actually went with Smikes' original suggestion. A couple of others of y'all had suggested this national group, and they refused to come out. They were like, if it's not soaking, then we can't do anything about it. And I was like, well, how do you know of it? I'm like, look, the top layer of the carpet is dry, but I don't know if the bottom is. Like, can't you just come out and look? And they're like, no, we can't do that unless you're like splashing in water. We refuse to come out. Okay, I know Smikes. That's the one that the company that we talked about, and it didn't make any sense to me. And so we called a local group, and he came out this afternoon. He actually lives 600 yards from our house, so he lives like 1 or 2 streets over. And he came over, and he had the machine, Smikes, that you were talking about, to check for mold and moisture, and like pulled up the carpet, and the padding underneath is soaked. So we're gonna have to rip up the carpet. We're gonna have to switch out the padding. We're gonna have to switch out drywall, because he showed me where there's mold already growing. So he was very kind. He was like, I really was hoping that I could make your Friday end well and not have to worry about random things. He's like, I don't seem to be able to do that this Friday for you. He's like, but he's like, at least you don't have to switch out the whole thing. So that was something. in your profession say there's not enough damage. Crux, I don't know. Maybe it's like payment and insurance that they're looking for. Apparently, to get them out, this national company, Crux, we should have just left the water and not try to clean it up on our own, which I don't understand. But and yes, Thuggy did show off the some of those gifts on the stream towards night. That was a lot of fun. For those of you who don't know, our friend Thug Shells does have a new single out. It is called Money. It is an absolute banger. Please go drop her that follow. She is the lead singer and creator and brainchild, everything of the SciAnts theme song and all, all of our fancy little pants alerts here. And I had a small, so that's who refused to come out, Smikes. That's the person who refused to come out, or the group that refused to come out, Smikes. Ricky's because they want to make a few extra. I wonder, Crux, if it was because. So the other guy I talked to said that it was actually a historical amount of rain, that we haven't had this much rain in this short of a time since 2016. And because the rain was spread over 3 days instead of one pour, it wasn't runoff. It just all like got absorbed by the ground, and that's why everything went under and like just nerfed everything. And so he said that he had 18 houses already this week. And so I wonder if even the bigger group had a bunch more. And so if there's a bunch of people who are having issues, you just go for the easier one, right? Like where you can, like, if there's more damage to be fixed, you can make more coin. That's what my undue sneaking suspicion. No, sorry, Smikes. Listen, they seem like a great group, and actually, Smikes, I posted on the local Facebook group, and they suggested that them as well. They were like, "Oh, I've used these people; they're great." So it was like even like the local people were like, "Yeah, go to them." They also suggested this other guy, and so that's the guy I ended up going with. Well, at least for now, he's putting together like a rough estimate of how much all this will cost, and so we can see like how much insurance covers and blah 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 blah. So there is that fun portion of it. So we'll see how it all goes. But that's the little random update on that front. Spikes, I also contacted the other person you told me to contact. Haven't heard back from them yet, but also working on that front. So I made a bunch of calls and other little random things. Also stopped by the PO. They have a couple of things to open. Didn't get a chance to open them yet, but we have, if some of the friendos come by, we will open up some of the random items that I acquired at the PO box. So let's go ahead and get started on ants. And I have how many of y'all have seen the movie Ant-Man? And there is a point to this. Because in the movie Ant-Man, there is a scene where he actually hi, Water, welcome in. How you doing, Water? Welcome on in, Water. So maybe Water's seen it, and maybe Towards Night. So the first Ant-Man movie, if y'all remember, Scott Lang has a whole bunch of ants that are at his disposal to fight the bad guy, who Aaron Cross, I believe, is his name. And so he's got carpenter ants, bullet ants, fire ants, and the crazy ant. And why am I even highlighting this video? So these the movie producers actually did a really good job in putting together the biology of these ants when they did the CGI, and the crazy ants were actually really nicely demonstrated in there as well. Before, after, this is after, so he was already broken out of prison. Hi, Tarzan. The only true ant movie is the Ant Movie. So listen, Tarzan, strangely enough, first of all, Tarzan, welcome in. Sorry, Tarzan, you got it. And I do like movies. Okay, one of my, not necessarily a favorite movie, but one that I enjoy is the movie Ant-Man. Now, Ant-Man that has a couple of, you can say, less than scientifically accurate components to it. For example, there is the ant that Ant-Man rides is named Antony, and it is a female queen ant, but is referred to as a male ant in the movie, but you can tell physiologically it is a female. But what they do get right is this section right here. They're talking about the different ant species that Hank Pym uses for his nefarious deeds as he tries to steal from Cross and cross enterprises. And so he uses the bullet ant, the carpenter ant, the crazy ant, and the fire ant. Hi, Nell. Come on in. And the crazy ant is actually what this science news story is about. And we're going to have a little bit more of a serious introduction to these ants. But I wanted to show you all how there is an actual well done representation of these creatures in this movie.
And your partners on this job.
Rastigo Mike, that is enough for me to pause the stream, do the air horn, and welcome you in. Hi, Rastigo Mike.
Paratrichina longicornis, commonly known as crazy ants. They're lightning fast and can conduct electricity, which makes them useful to fry out enemy electronics.
Well, you're not so crazy. Hey! You're cute.
That was a lot scarier a second ago.
It is true that there is different kinds of energy conductions that they can do. They are in fact called crazy because of their movement. It looks erratic to us. The reason it looks the way it does is because our eyes can't see fast enough, so not enough frames per second for you to perceive a straight uninterrupted movement that these ants have. So that's one of the neat things about them. We're going to talk a couple more facts about these ants and just some background information on them, and then we're going to get into some of why the science is really cool and what the science we learned about. So this video doesn't have any talking. It's just we're just going to watch the behaviors of these animals, and I hope you can appreciate how quickly they move and a little bit of that haphazard jagged movement where it's a little bit even too fast to glean as what's happening. What you can see here is all the different life stages. Here, these little cigar shaped things are the pupae. So those are that developmental stage of the embryo. So there's egg, larva, and the pupa. After the pupa is like the cocoon, and that's what they'll be hatching out of. Here, it's not easy to see if the queen is in here, but here at least the workers, you can see that all the workers look pretty much identical. So even though there's going to be a nurse and a soldier cast in these, they're all appearance-wise the same. So in terms of differences physically, they're quite similar. There's probably some eggs in here as well. You can see the cricket here, which, guys, we do have a friend cricket. She's not here right now. She's not the one being eaten here. It's just a real cricket. They're carnivorous little ants. You can tell their age by their body color, which is quite a neat trick. The lighter yellow colors are younger. The darker colors are older. You can see that there's this little white stripe running along their abdomen. That is an expansion of the tergite. The more they eat, it allows that little stomach to expand. And then if they eat less, it can contract back down. It also is the way that they have room for their ovaries, too. If ant stands for part of ourselves, sometimes Sneaky Sue, sometimes Sneaky Sue. Possibly. You need that? I mean, it's a little bit like our dessert stomach. Peekaboo draws. There's the queen. So NMD did say big ant earlier. You can see there is the queen there. It's a little bit hard to see with the condensation. They have to keep it damp. But there is the queen in the background. And you can see she's a couple of body lengths the size of the workers and also much wider as well. And that, again, the abdomen is massive on this side because she has to have room not only for fat, but also for ovaries as well. Side, some are bigger for others. So water for this, there's a range of sizes that they are, but those aren't because of the cast. They don't grow any bigger as they age. When they pop out from the pupal case or the cocoon as an adult, that's their final size. They don't molt. There's no additional growth there. There is a range, though, of sizes they can be. It's in part determined by the genetics, and the other part is determined by how much food they get as a developing larva. What's really cool is, even with fruit flies and other organisms, you can feed them a lot less when they're developing. They'll still hatch, but they're really, really tiny. And it's everything's proportionately super tiny on that front, which is kind of neat to be able to see that. So you're probably seeing that size range here. The queen, so Rastigo, there is the genes for her size, the queen's size, those genes are in all of those ants as well. So you might be like, then why is she not as big as the workers are not as big as she is? Because those genes to make her extra big are turned off in the workers. So there is currently an unknown mechanism, Rastigo Mike, we're not sure yet how it works, that dictates that this creature that's just been laid as an egg is going to become a queen ant. And she will be bigger. She stays a larva and a pupa much, much longer than the other workers do. And that longer stage of development allows her to get bigger and bigger and bigger. It's in part regulated by a molecule called ecdysone. If you keep those levels for a longer period of time, she gets bigger and bigger. And interestingly enough, Rastigomai, you can do that in the lab. You can alter ecdysone levels in, let's say, a fruit fly and make the larva bigger. It's just the issue is when you need to revert it back to how it should be to go through the next developmental step, there's not a genetic tool or trick to be able to do that right now. So as soon as you do get them to a certain stage, their bodies just aren't built to be that big. Versus with the ants, they would be able to handle it. We just don't have as many genetic tools in ants because they are very difficult to keep. Like, you can't make any genetic tools really in these animals because you would need to make the mutation in a queen, and the queen then needs to be able to be bred in the lab, and most ants cannot be mated in a lab, which I think is quite wild. Yeah, you can see her. She's huge. Her brain is also much bigger than the other individuals, and it's not just proportionately bigger. There's other regions that are bigger. Like some regions of her brain are more pronounced. What's also really cool is right here you can see there's these little nubs. There's a nub here, and there's going to be another one here. She used to have wings for a mating flight. She ripped those off after her mating flight and ate them as a source of energy. So she only flies once for mating, and then she's done with that. But she's left with wing scars. You can see it on that one as well. Yeah, very, very metal. She does make zenith, but that's where she has there's a pair of ovaries in there, and they're huge. You're talking, you can lay, like, with the most mature, not every species obviously, but these, you're talking about 500 to 1,000 eggs a day. So you need massive ovaries to be laying in there. And yes, Sneaky Sue, the queen ants, after a mating flight, rip off their wings and then they eat them. And that is critical because they need to start laying to start a new colony, and there's no food. And so she uses anything she can to get energy. She'll also lay fertilized embryos for workers, and she'll lay unfertilized embryos that she eats. And until that first batch of workers comes, she starts like smaller and smaller and smaller that she gets, until the workers pop out and there's then they're able to provide for her. Yeah. Based on color, she's pretty old. So Rastigo, in order to have this size colony, she has to be older too. Any queen that's really light in color, she would probably still even have her wings. Rastigo, that darkening is usually on the range, like from hatching to about 3 weeks, and then they're pretty much full darkness that they're gonna be as an adult. So it doesn't give you sense of time in terms of years. It gives you sense of time as in weeks, and then after that you can't really tell by color anymore, which is kind of, it's a neat trick to have, but it's only at the beginning of life you have it. Imagine having wings and just ripping them off and eating them. I mean, Sneaky, listen, that, as Mick Zenna said, that would be really metal, I think. And they're really pretty too. I mean, I think they're quite lovely looking creatures. I like the stripes on the patterning as well. There are the eggs that are being held. They can be held in little clumps. They actually stick together. They have really small hairs on them. The queen can't do some work for food. So Rastigo, here's the thing. If the queen builds a tiny little nest underground usually. If Rastigo, she leaves to get food and dies, the colony's dead. right? No, there's no queen that's going to replace her. So her priority is the most dangerous thing that she's going to do is mate, because she has to leave the colony, fly around in the air. She could be eaten, right? And like during the mating flight, as she's digging herself a colony. After that, she's not leaving again. So she has to stay safe for the good of the colony and for that genetic information to be passed on. So it's not that she can't do the work, it's just that from a genetic perspective, it would be a mistake for her to go out and do anything like that. Wings are a great meal. I hear they fly off the shelves of the local market. My goodness, optic nerve. Well done, optic nerve. Well done. Cotton candy paraglider. It's not a bad way to put it, Digron, I think. How you doing today? There's the pupil case. There's a little cricket that's running around. They hunt them. Poor little cricket. Has no idea what's happening in there. Or maybe she does, and that's even more terrifying. You can also give them, like, this is the sugar water feeding. They really do also enjoy sugar water. There's actually been a fair bit of experimentation done on how their social stomachs. So they collect this nectar and then feed it back to other individuals in the colony. So it's like little scouts come out. And what's cool is you can change the colors. And their bellies will change with that color. And so you can track and see who was taken back to the colony. Like what food source they preferred as well. And they also do meat eating too. And here they're actually feeding each other. So they eat by a process called trophallaxis, where they essentially spit into each other's mouths. They regurgitate the food they collected from outside. It looks like beautiful kisses. But you see there's the liquid right there between the two. A little optic, yeah. Or I think the best analogy I've heard is like the birds. How the birds are doing. Remember College is Fasting to me. Looking forward to hanging out with you stream. The Grunt, thank you for being here and thank you for liking ants. Okay, so how does this all connect? This will be connected back to chimerism. So the paper we'll talk about in a moment, and I'll show you all the title of the paper and all the fancy cool things behind it. But I want to do one more kind of background information of why these ants are also studied in a lab. And why the big interesting thing is they're very successful across the world. They are actually very invasive. And so this paper does shed light on why these animals are so successful in colonizing all over the world. So let's cut into that.
With species mixing and mingling thanks to migrations, freak events, and slow-creeping expansions. But since we humans arrived on the scene, we've put things into fast forward, moving plants, animals, and other organisms around the globe, whether intentionally or not. Once in a while, one of these transplants might have an evolutionary quirk, like deadly poison, a lack of predators, or a voracious appetite, that unexpectedly helps it dominate its new territory. Earthworms, for example, were introduced into North America by European settlers, and have been inching across the continent ever since, tilling soil and improving crop yields as they go. But if a newcomer starts to harm us, or a part of the environment we care about, we'll call it an invasive species. Technically speaking, humans aren't invasive, because we don't usually consider ourselves an ecological threat to ourselves. But other species certainly are. One way they get our attention is by costing us money. A lot of money. The US spends billions of dollars fighting invasive weeds like the pretty but pesky yellow rocket flower that chokes fields and creeps onto golf courses and lawns. Other invaders wreak so much havoc on fragile ecosystems that we can't help but notice even if billions aren't at stake. For example, the yellow crazy ant, a likely native of Southeast Asia, has been nom-nom-nomming many beloved and endangered Australian creatures.
So we saw in the video that they ate other bugs, but they aren't that picky. They will eat other creatures as well, quite reliably. And there's nothing in there of those creatures that they're eating. They don't know that it's a threat because they never grew up with them in terms of evolutionary time. And so it's just a free meal for the ants. Who would think of the golf course and the non-native grasses? Listen, Smikes, I don't know. It's very important to keep those golf courses green, Smikes. Why? I don't know. I don't know. It's a great question. That I don't have an answer to.
since its arrival several decades ago. These little ants feast on nearly anything and everything in their path. Insects, amphibians, birds, small mammals, even the famous red crabs on Australia's Christmas Island, which used to keep the island's undergrowth in check. Without them, the ecosystem has veered into chaos. But noticing invasive species is easy. Dealing with them is the real bugger. When we brought rabbits to New Zealand for food and fur, they escaped and bred like, well, rabbits, overrunning the country. So we introduced ferrets to control the rabbits, but they too spread like wildfire, generally ignoring the rabbits while gobbling up rare species like the now nearly extinct kakapo. New Zealand is still overrun by both furry fiends, and this is just one of many well-meaning attempts at biological control that have...
So it's how do we find off this ant species that's also killing so much in the world? Watching ants shedding a cockroach into my bathroom the other day, and next day all its legs were sticking out. Like, oh, that's fifth function. That's. I mean, it's beautiful, but it's also unsettling. It's an old woman who flew out a fly. Isn't that Smike's that's a nursery rhyme, if I'm not mistaken. I have like a weird neuron is firing about that.
Ended in disaster. The best way to fight an invasion is to first arm ourselves with knowledge. Instead of trying to kill Australia's yellow crazy ants by just spraying insecticide everywhere, we've learned that the best approach is a year-long multi-step assault that specifically targets ant-riddled areas at the times when the egg-laying queens are mature and susceptible to our treatments. Then we spread two kinds of bait for the workers to bring back to the nest. One kills, and the other sterilizes the queens. Neither chemical is perfect, but executed together, they can knock out a whopping 99% of the population. But with many invasives, even 99% isn't enough, because it doesn't remove whatever advantage gave the invaders an edge in the first place. So unless we honest to goodness get rid of every reproductively active individual, eventually they'll return as vigorously as before, keeping us constantly on our toes. We really just need to stop moving potential troublemakers around in the first place, leaving bunnies where they belong, and making sure ants and earthworms don't stow away in ships, cars, or excavators. But in a modern, globalized world, this is easier said than done. For those species that we do accidentally or intentionally let loose, only to see them spread wildly out of control, our best hope is to learn as much as we can about their habits and their biology. Only then do we have a chance of keeping their harmful antics at bay.
Now you know why I like this video. They said antics, right? So why I showed this is just introducing the concept of that these animals are very good at surviving. And we didn't know for a time as to why they were so good. This is one reason we think that they are doing so very well. It is the paper title. She swallowed a fly, then a spider. She swallowed something else, and something else, and something else, and something else. Swallows a lion, and essentially New Zealand. I had a better memory of that nursery rhyme, Spikes. But you know, I'm gonna go with whatever you say. You're an expert. It's a little semantic-y, Kai. It's a little semantic-y, possibly. So the title of the paper: Obligate Chimerism in Male Crazy Ants. Doctor. Hi, Alex. Hi, Carlo, the stream scribe. How are y'all doing today? Welcome on in. Guys, if you're not checking out Legendary, the Breathtaking, Amazing Carlo, the stream scribe, you're not doing your life right. He is a legendary artist extraordinaire, extremely handsome, extremely kind, and one of our best of friends. Go check out the stream scribe. Andrew, we have to give you a shout out afterwards, Andrew, because Andrew's also. Wait, no, you can, Carlo, you can high five towards night. Look, you do this.
My best friend.
You can give him a high five now, Carlo, or anyone for that matter, because high fives are very important. You know, it's just, Carlo, we have to have high fives here, right? It's a loving place. It's a loving place. I just gave you a high five towards night, but getting one from Carlo would be a next level kind of thing. So, title of the paper: Obligate Chimerism in Male Yellow Crazy Ants. So we have to figure out what the terms.
My best friend.
Thank you, Carlo. That is from an anime, and I cannot help but like internally chuckle at every time I hear that, because it's such an aggressive "you're my best friend" sound clip. It doesn't make sense in the context of the sentiment, but it just makes me chuckle a little extra. So I'm like, well, it's hilarious. I have to integrate it somehow, right? Possibly. I don't know, but it makes me chuckle. Anywho, let's define what these terms mean, and then we'll get into the paper itself and some of the background. There is an image here that I had. Oh, here we go. This is kind of their graphical summary. Fly, spider, bird, cat, dog, cow, horse, then died. I didn't remember that the lady died. Well, there we go. Thank you, Alex Vixen. I did not remember that. Doesn't make sense. Okay, so what did the researchers do? The researchers went ahead and they sequenced these male crazy ants. And in ants, males are supposed to be haploid, meaning they have one copy of the genetic information in their cells. Females are diploid in ants. And there's other insects too where it works like this. So an unfertilized egg, if there's no egg and sperm but just the egg itself, if it is laid, it will become male. If the egg is fertilized, it becomes female. Okay. So they started sequencing, the researchers started sequencing these male crazy ants. And they go, this is very strange. This animal seems like it's diploid. And this was in 2017. The paper came out. It was like there are two copies of the genetic information in these animals. And that would suggest that they're diploid, not haploid. So it goes against the grain of what we know of how reproduction works in these animals. We'll have you, Krugs. So they went ahead and did further sequencing. So this study went down to more of the cellular level. You're not just going to be sequencing the whole DNA from the entire animal. They went cell by cell. So there's a process called single cell RNA sequencing. And they looked at DNA sequencing, and they looked at in each cell what is the composition of genetic material. And what they find is there's two kinds of DNA in these animals. They called it the R DNA and the W DNA. And that was just the DNA that comes from either the maternal side or the paternal side. So the short and sweet is, you got a fertilized egg that was supposed to be a female because it's fertilized. However, the embryo split. And it split and became haploid. So there's never a full integration of the chromosomes. Instead, now you're starting to form an organism from two different cells instead of one, and each of those two cells have different kinds of genetic information. And so the idea of it, and why researchers think that this is really cool, is that these males' reproductive organs were a mix of genetic information. They were either, there were some cells that were one kind of DNA, and there was other cells that were a different kind of DNA. And this presumably gives them an advantage of better increased likelihood of survival during times of stress, because it's unique genetic information that they have available to them. So when they mate, it's not just passing on one kind of genetic information, they're passing on potentially a bunch of different kinds. But let's talk about some examples of chimeras in the wild and where this actually happens, and it's a little bit more relatable. You all know how much we love cats, right? So let's start with chimerism in cats, chat. And yes, your lovely kitty cat could be a chimera.
You know what's fascinating and also a little bit gross when you think about it? Chimeras. Not the mythological ones, but actual chimeras, organisms that contain the genetic information of more than one individual. And yes, this is a real thing.
So that's what we have right in our male ants. There is the genetic information of both what came from the egg and what came from the sperm. That's usually what happened in a female as well when the cells fuse. But in the female, every single cell has the same genetic information from the two individuals. Here, in these males, each of the different cells has one of two different types of genetic information. And that's what makes them the chimera. Grows like this gentleman. This gentleman is very young in this video, Smikes. This is over a decade old, Smikes. Quite crazy.
Chimeras are usually formed in the very early stages of embryonic development when two zygotes fuse into one, and the resulting chimera basically ends up being its own fraternal twin.
In this situation, though, with the ants, the zygote splits. So one cell goes and gets mom's genetic information, the other one gets dad's genetic information, and that's what forms the chimerism in this animal.
Which is, yeah, I know. And you end up with all sorts of weird conditions, like if you're like a male and a female fraternal twin fuses into one, sometimes you get one ovary and one testicle, literally with different genetic information in them. There's also this woman who needed a kidney, and so they did a blood test on her kids to see if they'd be good donors, and they did it, and they were like, not only would they be bad donors, but they aren't your kids. And she was like, yeah, but they came out of me. It turned out that her blood and her organ systems were from two different people. They had two different genetic makeups. So she gave birth to a different person than her blood would have given birth.
NMD, thank you for learning. We love you, NMD. We love you, NMD. Chat, make sure to follow NMD96 on her partner Poosh. On her partner Poosh, chat. Go check out the lovely and amazing NMD96. Hi, Kels Bells. How you doing, Kels? Kels will get you next. You'll get you next time shout out as well. I came powder. You know me, real mom. I mean, listen, I came powder. Some people do say that, and it's quite rude. I guess in this instance, that would be correct. How you doing, I came powder? Welcome on in. And yes, the Chimera twins, Alex.
And I'll wager you a box of jujubes that you've heard of the adorable two-faced cat with mismatched eyes, Venus. She's often described as a chimera, but it turns out that she's probably not. Instead, she appears to be what most female mammals are, a mosaic. See, a female has two X chromosomes, one from her father and one from her mother. But as an embryo, each of her cells deactivates one of those two X's at random. So she ends up with two different groups of cells in her body, one with only her dad's X and one with her mom's. In humans, this differentiation is difficult to detect because not a lot of traits are linked to those X chromosomes. But in cats, that distinctive tortoiseshell coloration that Venus has is X-linked. So what we're seeing is probably the arrangement of her different mom X cells and dad X cells that happen to line up down the middle of her very kissable face. So Venus may not really be a chimera, but try not to be too heartbroken because you know who is. I'm sure you know one, actually, because you came out of one. Just today, scientists in Seattle say that they found the first evidence of male DNA in the brains of women. After performing autopsies on the brains of 59 women, they found that nearly 2/3 of them contained different DNA, and it was male, XY, not female, XX. Now, the researchers don't know the history of each woman whose brain was studied, but they suspect that the DNA got into their brain through what's known as fetal chimerism, when a pregnant woman receives cells from her embryo, which then go on to start lineages in the mother's body.
Crosstalk between the placenta and the mother. There could be transmission of cells, which is quite wild that something like that would happen, that you'd have some of your baby's cells inside your body and integrated into your cell types and having different kinds of DNA from your kiddo in there. I was going to use a mosaic as a pickup line one of these days to see how it goes. Listen, Towards Night, if used in the correct context, it could be beautiful. For example, Towards Night, if you're in an art gallery and you could be like, you are a beautiful mosaic, and that could make sense on the multiple levels. If the woman's a geneticist, then you could be like, oh, you're trying to say that I have unique features. Or if they're an art aficionado, you could be referring to the mosaic on the wall. It has multiple meanings that way. Towards Night, it might be beautiful. If you do it in a different location, it might be less than ideal. Guys, go check out Kel's Bells, an amazing maker and crafter extraordinaire. We love you, Kel's Bells. Self-science streams, your personal style has serious game. That's Oh Nightbot. Oh Nightbot. Achy sappy love songs say you're part of me are sort of true. Not between lovers, but between kid and mom. No, there's no mullet. There's no mullet, Gwen. There's no mullet. It's the usual length. Everything's just been shortened up. Gwen, there's no mullet. The back got cut, the front got cut. Gwen, it looks very nice. Gwen, there's no mullet, I promise you. I promise you there's no mullet, Gwendolyn P. Although, Gwen, if you required me to ease up on the sides a little more, I can get a little bit on that on there too. Love you, Cal's Bells. Gwen, now I'm nervous. Now is it really a mullety? It does look like a mullet. Now I'm horrified. Now I'm absolutely horrified. Gwen, I don't want it to be a mullet. No, Gwen, no, that's not a mullet. That can't be a mullet, Gwen. Maybe? No. 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 I don't think so. Maybe a little. I mean, it was hard to see from the back, Smikes, but I think it's fine. Maybe it's fine. Now I'm nervous about it. Now Gwendolyn P's got me all nervous. Gwen, thank you for pointing this out to me, though. I'll have to take some shears at it, and maybe do a little cleanup on that. I'm so sorry. Isn't fluffy enough to be a mollusk and not a fish. Thank you, Alex. She will be, Smikes. That's very true. She said it looks fine. Now I'm curious. Anywho, Gwendolyn P, how are you doing, Gwen? Gwen.
My best friend.
High five to you, Gwen. High five. Carry on, Gwendolyn P. Thank you, Gwendolyn P. It's great to have you here, Gwendolyn P. I think it's a mullet. I think Gwen was just see. I don't know. Now I'm nervous. Andrew, I love you. Andrew. Guys, go follow our amazing moderator, the lovely Andrew CZ, who I just want to give a big hug to. Look at your face, Andrew. All right.
That can last for the rest of her life. This phenomenon, also known as microchimerism, was first discovered in the 1990s in women's blood, but this is the first time it's been observed in their brains. This could change current thinking about how widespread chimerism is in women and also what implications it might have for the study of brain disorders like Alzheimer's disease. So, as if those 9 months weren't enough, Mom, you're still carrying a little bit of me with you wherever you go. Thanks for watching this episode of SciShow Breaking. If you want to keep up to date on science news, you can go to youtube.com/SciShow and subscribe. Questions, ideas, and comments are always welcome on Facebook, Twitter, and of course, down in the comments below.
So that's one example of yellow crazy ants. It's analyzing the genetics of these ants. Male ants should be haploid, having single copies of their chromosomes. And instead, what they identify is these males are, if you sequence the whole animal, it looks like it's diploid because there's 2 different kinds of DNA in there. And then it turns out that it's because the embryo split early on, and then there ends up becoming 2 different types of cells in this animal's body with 2 different kinds of DNA. And it's especially important in the reproductive system because when these males mate, they not only pass along one kind of genetic information, but as they're mating, it could be a diverse potpourri or smattering of genetic information they spread on. So that's been at least one part attributed to why they've been so successful in the wild and colonizing just all over. They are invasive species, and that's one of the suspicions as to why they're so good at being invasive, because of this extra genetic component that they have, giving them genetic differences and variation, and that extra variation allows them to be very good colonizers and settlers, where they would do really well in instances where they think maybe they wouldn't be so hot. So we're going to talk a little bit more about chimerisms on this news story, and then eventually move on to the second news story of the night. Right, Breach? It is. I think it's kind of cool. Let's see if we have an animation that just shows how cool this is. Maybe it's just for science. Maybe it's just for science, Breach. Maybe it's just for science. But either way, it's cool.
People, Joe here. In 1960, a baby girl was born in a Seattle hospital. She was healthy, though one of her eyes was brown and the other was hazel. And her organs were a bit unusual as well. On one side of her body, she had an ovary, and on the other, what looked like a testicle. Strangest of all, when doctors tested her blood, they found a mix of 2 blood types. The genetic tests revealed that the cells in the girl's body came from 2 distinct individuals, a male and a female. This girl was what we call a chimera.
The ants we're talking about are the exact same. It's the same principle, except these chimeras for humans, each cell has 2 maternal and paternal chromosomes. They're just from different people. In the ants, their chimeras, there's only one copy of like a chromosome in each cell, but this chromosome is from mom and this chromosome is from dad, and they're in 2 different cells, and that's what makes the different populations. Same principle as what's in this video, just the numbers are a little bit different. Science is always my favorite subject in school, absolutely loving this. Breach, we're glad to have you here. Again, my background, my wife and I run the channel. We have our PhDs in molecular and systems biology. That's a widespread term for genetics, neuroscience, entomology. Both my wife and I for over a decade worked on fruit fly genetics and behavior. We also worked on ant epigenetics and behavior, planarians, stem cells. Lita's worked on bees. So ask and you shall receive all the questions. And guys, also make sure to follow our friend Captain Commerce, who is a collector of pint glasses, game development, and just all around hats and ducks and just being cool. We love you, Captain Commerce. Welcome on in, friendo. Go check out Captain Commerce, y'all.
So how did this happen? Well, her mother had been pregnant with fraternal twins, a boy and a girl, who had fused into one embryo, resulting in a single healthy child. But doctors used to think that chimeras were...
Which, by the way, can I just say how gnarly that is? That if you were born, but you had absorbed your potential twin, and so now you have some of their genetics in your body. It's really cool, but I think I'd be very unsettled by it. Like, I'm like, oh my god, I have, like, my personal, start coming to have 2 souls in me. Like, how does that work? I don't even know. And it's just wild.
Were extremely rare, but as genetic testing has become more widespread and advanced, it turns out there's more chimeras out there than we thought. In fact, you might even be one.
Exactly. It's one of those like old riddles, right? Like if 2 men enter, 1 man leaves. How does this happen? It's like, oh, it's a chimera. It's like, wait a minute. I can't ever tell you, Nia, how much either sometimes I really enjoy those riddles or I really hate them. It's like, oh, really, that's what that was. Sometimes it is.
If the idea that humans could be weird mashups of 2 or more different individuals sounds like something out of a monster myth, that's because it is. Luckily, I know a real-life monsterologist, so I called my friend Dr. Emily Zarka from the YouTube channel Monstrum, so she...
Yes, I think you're right, too. The Dwight... Sierra Victoria, thank you for the follow. on the following when we say that Dwight Schrute ate his twin during gestation. Listen, Dwight is hilarious. I love Dwight. He's crazy, but he is a wonderful character. Actually, the core set of characters on The Office, all of them are gold. Some can be annoying, but they're all really well done, and I think we get annoyed by them because they played the role so well. It's like, you just don't want them to happen. It's like, wow, why are you doing this? And even Robert California, who comes in later, is hilarious to me. I love Robert California. He's so strange. Particularly when they come with 3 equally valid answers that aren't the answer. Exactly. There's nothing wrong with Andy. Torres, listen, Andy, I've known Andys like that. And he plays the role really, really well. I will say, Torres, he gets the short end of the stick when his music career doesn't take off. That is a little bit sad. But beyond that, like, Andy's good. I mean, and Stanley? Come on, Stanley? Pretzel Day? Andrew used to be Andy. Guys, go follow a recovering Andy. Go follow Andrew CZ. Breathtaking streamer extraordinaire. Mental, workout streamer. Technological wizard. Mentality. Having a good mentality and just being breathtaking. Please go follow our lovely friend Andrew CZ. Love the man's face. He did what he did. Who went to Dartmouth? There was someone, right, Smikes, who went to Dartmouth in that. Purposely tanked when he was terrible, then cool, then terrible, and good at the end. Yeah, exactly. It was a nice character evolution that they had with Andy. I think the Will Ferrell character was the only one that really didn't hit for me, where I felt like, it should have been much better than he was, because Will Ferrell is usually hilarious, and it just didn't feel like a right fit. But my sister loves The Office. She hates Robert California, the one who came after. Will Ferrell's character, but I think that is it David Spader? I think that's the guy's name, is hilarious. The Office, Gwendolyn P. Wasn't a fan of Robert. I love that he's so strange towards that. He says such insane off the wall things. Every time it just makes me chuckle. I'm like, yes, more of this, please. All right.
She could tell us more.
Chimeras.
The word chimera comes from the name of a great mythological beast in ancient Greek mythology, the chimera. Said to have the body and head of a lion, the tail of a snake, and the head of a goat placed randomly in the middle of its back, the monster first appears in the Iliad. The chimera is killed, but because of her impossible hybridity, we've carried her name with us through the centuries.
Thank you, Dr. Z. I just want to point out that Emily really does study monsters.
And so that monster analogy is quite apt for what we're talking about in terms of different genetics kind of put together. Andrew, I'm surprised you didn't say OMG today. I'm proud of you, Andrew. Very nicely done. Gotten depths from the middle of season 2 through season 6 thus far. Andrew, I'll be honest with you. The first time I watched The Office, I skipped season 1 because I just couldn't. Now I'll be like, you know, it's not as bad as Scott's Tots, but it's still kind of like that. Hi, Niema. Welcome
Together,
Yogurt Garrel!
rule the galaxy.
Yogurt Garrel! Thank you for the resub tier 3, Yogurt Garrel! I don't know about you, but I'm feeling 22. Yogurt Garrel. How you doing, Yogurt? And Nima, thank you for the follow. Vigets!
Curious and curious.
And Bit Gamey as well. Welcome on in, everybody. You will forever watch Scott's Tots. I understand that towards night. Guys, go give our friend Yogurt Girl a follow. She is a supermodel extraordinaire across the country of Canada.
Don't you like me a little bit?
Ew, I don't even like you a little bit.
Huh, I heard you like me a little bit.
Well, maybe just a little bit.
Hi, Big Gamey. Love your face. Love your stream ambassador. Push! Yes, the push to.
Let's go.
Guys, Yogurt Girl is a legendary streamer extraordinaire on her partner Poosh. She's a Lego builder, Tetris 99 professional, a celebrity on her own right, but also celebrity knower, all the fancy pants things. Yogurt, how the heck are you doing today, man? Welcome on in. And hi, Bit Gamey as well. Bit, what did you have for dinner tonight? Bit, I got haircutted, but I'm told by Gwendolyn P that I look as Taj like Whiskey Tango, is what she told me. It turns out that Whiskey Tango is a key secret phrase for how she really feels about how I look today. It is, you know, it's unfortunate, Big Gamey. Meatball subs, Big Gamey. What kind of bread? What kind of bread, Big Gamey, and what kind of cheese? And did you have anything else on there? Just had nachos and margaritas. My God, I would love some margaritas right now. I think Lita got some stuff for us to get margaritas. Ooh, I'll have to ask her for some. Ooh, that would be lovely. I should now Yogurt. I really want to have some margaritas now. I think we got everything, but who knows if it's underwater or not? You know, with all that, who knows? And supermodel and Tetris Gladiator, exactly. After for an hour at the curbside in the store, whatever Norbert solves are, sprinkled mozzarella added fancy. Oh, very nice, Bit Gamey. Yeah, I saw that curve. I'm so sorry it took an hour for that. Oy, Bit Gamey, that is terrible, sir. That is terrible. Crux, I'm glad you're here, Crux. Thank you for being here, Crux. So yeah, we're talking about this really cool paper that showed chimeraism in ants. So normally ants are haploid, single genetic copy, and then these were sequenced and found to be diploid, so having two different genomes, and they're like, that's weird, it's not supposed to happen. Turns out it's not actually two different genomes in every cell. It's that there's still, each cell has a single genetic copy. It's just that there's from multiple individuals inside this one animal. And the hypothesis is the reason this is cool and why it's important is because these are invasive ants, and one way that they can actually increase their genetic diversity is by having sperm that have different genomes in it, you know, that they can pass on. So it really promotes a lot of differentiation in genetics and the population. So there's not a genetic bottleneck. So we don't fully understand, Yogurt, how it works on the chromosomal level, because what ends up happening is the animal still makes a zygote. So like a male, like, because in females and ants, it's like it's a fertilized embryo. Here you still get a fertilized embryo, but somehow the chromosomes know not to line up on the metaphase plate during cell division. They know to split. And so when they don't replicate that first round, so when the cell splits
together.
Can you solve a riddle for me? Claims you've been asking him Vigets. Is that true? Well, I mean, so Sneaky Sue, I assumed that there was a Vigets in there. I assumed that there was Yogurt Girl is also here, and she loves to say gluten tog. All these features happening. Gwen's here. So Gwen said, NMD, that I look very much Whiskey Tango-y with this haircut. Do with that what you will, NMD. Do with that what you will. So chat, these chimeras that we're talking about in this video, the chimeras are with humans, and each of the cells in a human, that if you're a chimera, you have 2 copies, still have like 2 chromosomes, creating your chimerism, which is different from the insects, where there is a single. It's 2 chromosomes, but they're in 2 different cells. So individual chromosomes that are different in cell type. So the same principle happens. I had to Google Whiskey Tango. No. Gwen said Whiskey Tango. Gwen was like, you know what? Well, it's a very Whiskey Tango-y feel you got here tonight. And I'm like, I'm sorry, Gwendolyn P. I'm sorry, Gwendolyn P. And I don't want to be that guy. But yeah. Jern, Gwen was asking for new characters to be drawn. Like Mummy, Antonia's, and dancing, and just like all the things. Which I'm okay with, John. It's a little stressful, you know, because John, she also wanted like this animation. She wanted this to be like have extra anger. She also wanted to be able to be sad.
Yeah, yippee!
And St. Patrick's too, but also sad. She also wanted to be shocked. Why do Pizza? She must be pretty epic. Her name is Gwendolyn P. John. The P stands for epic.
For a living, which is so cool, and you should definitely watch Monstrum because it's awesome. Now, in biology, a chimera is not as scary as in the myth. It simply refers to an individual who is an amalgamation of 2 or more genetically distinct individuals of the same species. No goat heads growing out of their back or anything.
John, the other reason I like this video, John, and thank you for coming at just the right time.
No goat.
It reminds me of the bear that you have sometimes, John. And yes, this is Hank Green's brother. Oh goodness, what is his name? He's also a green. I forget what his name is, but it's the brothers. Yeah, but so John, that reminds me of the bear that pops up sometimes. I know there's no bear in your stream, but there is occasionally this bear that pops out in your stream and like is looking at you, and we have to bear with you and this whole thing. It's all this craziness. Chimera, you know where I learned about chimeras, Yogurt Garrel? Mission Impossible 2. There was a chimera virus that was created that Ethan Hunt had to save the world from, and the reason that was interesting is that because it was the virus was a chimera, it was hard to make like a vaccine and a cure against, because it would constantly recombine with itself, and because there were 2 genomes, you never knew how it would recombine and how that would work, which is quite wild. Again, it's just like it was a made-up thing in Mission Impossible, but I remember Tom Cruise's character was very like...
You don't understand. You don't understand. If you understood, you wouldn't understand.
See, John was looking at me as I was like beating the pirate heart. It's a whole thing. Chimeras from D&D. I don't tactics. I had friends who played D&D. I never played because I did not understand. I liked watching and telling, we had one that was a good dungeon master who would tell the stories, but I was like, I had no idea how that worked, like how all that was working. And
NMD.
Yes, Andrew, NMD. Yes, we love Jern.
Ahoy there, feckin' scientists.
Jern thinks I'm hating him, just looking out for mental health. No, NMD. Listen, Jern doesn't go to sleep until like very, very early or very late. You know, it's depending on his mood. John is a gem, and he knows very well NMD. No, you don't need help, John. If you do need help, you ask. You know that, John. My DMs are always open. You need to chat. You know, you have my phone number, John. You can call me. You can text me. I have my phone. If you call me right now, John, we will have a conversation on the phone. I'll pause everything and be like, you know what? Hi, WizKid. I'd be like, you know what? Hi, John. How you doing? We can even FaceTime, and I can look at you and be like, my God, he's so handsome.
In dreams, one is not tethered by earthly limitations.
What does that mean?
In fact, John, I have a program that when I put my phone on sleep mode, so that it goes on Do Not Disturb, I have a couple of people that can call me, even if it's on sleep mode, okay? That's my mom, my dad, my sister, my brother, Lita, eventually baby Alona when she gets her phone number at some point, and Irish John Games. He can call me in the dead of night if he needs anything, and he knows that I will be there to pick up. And Smikes as well. And Smikes as well. That's also a thing. What are the requirements of becoming one of your brothers? John, here's the thing. It's too late. John, listen. I have grown so much love for you that if you would accept me as a brother, I would just die from happiness. I would just die from happiness. And yes, Smikes can call me as well. Jern can stay until sunrise. Jern can do whatever you want. Gwen, Jern's a pirate. He is a pirate, Gwendolyn P, okay? He pillaged my heart, Gwen. He pillaged my heart and brought booty to my soul. I know how that sounds, but you know what?
Ahoy there, feckin' scientists.
It's fine. It's totally fine. Booty, you say?
Thank you for the booties in the face.
Even... God, bit gamey. Game. Weenus! Okay. Are we Gucci now, folks? Are we Gucci? John permeated my brain to say Gucci. Before John, I didn't know that Gucci was anything beyond like a bag, right? A brand. And then John, it has become such ingrained in my day-to-day life that I was telling Lita the other day, like with the flood in the basement.
Gucci.
I was like, honey, it's gonna be Gucci. And she looks at me, she's like, this is not a situation for Gucci. I don't know. She's like, you can use that Gucci term with your friends, but this is not a time for Gucciisms. And I'm like, serious matter. This is a serious matter. I know, look, but my point is, Bit Gamey, that I have been has come so far in my mind of how of the phrase Gucci that it's just that's my way of saying everything's gonna be fine instead of saying fine. It's
Gucci.
It's Gucci. It's a whole thing. I know, Bit Gamey. I know. Listen, and I tried to cut the tension with some humor because it always makes me smile when Jern says Gucci, and then it doesn't always work, but we can break the tension.
Feckin' Gucci.
That was Jern. That was Jern. No. Okay. There's a goat there.
Heads growing out of their back or anything. Now for humans, this means a person containing cells from 2 or more different people. The little girl in our example is called a tetragametic chimera because 4 gametes or reproductive cells came together to create her.
So it's tetragametic, 4 gametes fused together to make this. A gamete has single copy of the genome, and they came together to make 2 cells that each now have 2 copies of the genome. The ant is a little bit different. It's 2 instead of tetra. It's bi, but it's the same principle. It's just you're cutting it in half, and it's because otherwise you'd have a female for the ant. So the way the genetics work is you have to have it run in this way. It's not XY for ants. It's copy number of the individuals. And so, but it's the same principle that we're learning about here. You can never read the room again. He could be giving a TED talk with Gucci. Yes, that's right. Gwendolyn P will be talking up there and be like, all right, so and epigenetics, and here's how we can modulate epigenetics. How we all Gucci in the room. Here we go, Gucci in the room. Let's go. I say Gucci to the family mostly be annoying since it featured heavily in the movie 8th Grade. I've never heard of that movie, Bit Gamey, but listen, you get a giant pass as you're a father. In fact, Bit Gamey, it is your responsibility to take modern day coolisms, such as Coral. That's what the young people were saying for a while, like, hey, that's a really coral movie out there, you know, saying it's cool. And then you say, hey, Mini Gamey, that was pretty coral, wasn't it? And you go, maybe it was even coral. And that's when Mini Game is like, Ted, you're so lame. And they run off. And then you're like, mission accomplished. So, Bit Gamey, listen. As a father, you have a very different role in saying Gucci in these phrases. I thought that was from The Walking Dead Carl. I have no idea. I actually have never seen The Walking Dead. The only Carl that I know is the llama or alpaca that goes, Carl! Yeah. Oh, and then there was also this Carl at Trivia Night back in New Hampshire. We went to this trivia night once a week at a barbecue joint. And one of them was a Game of Thrones round where they gave us a picture. They gave us a picture of like a long piece of paper with tons of pictures of the characters, and you have to write the character's name and say if they're dead or alive in that current season of Game of Thrones. I've never watched Game of Thrones. I've never read Game of Thrones. That was the same for our entire table. None of us knew who any of these characters were beyond the Khaleesi, and I had no idea if the Khaleesi was still alive or not. I also had no idea how to spell it, and you have to spell it correctly. So instead, Bit Gamey, we did variations of the name Carl on each of those pictures, because the trivia guy's name / he also was a server there, his name was Carl. And we got every one of them wrong. He was extremely angry with us at the end, like, or not angry, but he was like highly irritated that we just like, you know, came up with all these Carlisms. And eventually we did so poorly that night that he gave us a book from his car as our prize of doing so poorly. He was like, this is a used book of mine. Have this as a prize. Yeah. That barbecue place did end up going out of business. Not because it was terrible. It was the issue is that barbecue you have to make the night before and you can't reuse the next day. And so they just weren't, you know, having enough turnover, and yeah, they just like unfortunately went out of business, which is disappointing because it wasn't terrible. It wasn't good, but it wasn't terrible. You know, it's the whole thing. Anyway, I just noticed his shirt. That's strange. All right, let's continue.
2 of her father's sperm fertilized 2 of her mother's eggs.
What book? I have no idea, Smikes. It was in the back of my car for a long time. And then I have no idea what happened after that, Smikes. I'm going to be totally honest with you. I have no idea what ended up happening. I think we maybe donated it. None of us read it, Smikes. None of us read it. Instead, we just decided that's like just no one wanted it. It was a little stained too, Smikes. You didn't know why it was so dirty. Guys, speaking of, I do have a request. If y'all haven't followed, thank you for the gift, Tactics. Far too kind. A feather ball too. My goodness, Tactics. Guys, we have a friendo. We have a friendo who is a VTuber gamer streamer and singer. His name is Suna Chicano. He is 6 followers away from hitting a follow goal. He's trying to get to 900 followers, and he is exactly 6 followers away. If you're not already following him, please consider dropping him the follow just so that he can get to that follow goal. He's really hoping to get to it tonight. So if y'all wouldn't mind, again, giving him that follow. He's got 2 people following him. He has 4 more people. 4 more people to drop him that follow, and he will hit his follow goal of 900. And it's a big milestone for him. It's actually his affiliate anniversary today. I don't know. I think it's the 1 year affiliate anniversary. So if y'all can mind giving him that follow, would be very much appreciated. He's getting very close again to hitting that milestone. Yeah, thank you guys. All right, back to the science.
Resulting in 2 embryos that merged into 1.
Thank you, Professor Knight! I say we stop streaming until he makes it. He did. It's just 4 more follows. Hi, Pimp Cat! How you doing, Pimp Cat? How you doing, Pimp Cat? Tactics, thank you again for the gift. Why are you so sweet, Tactics? Tactics, when you and I meet one day, can we also have a giant hug? I feel like that would be lovely. Possibly, potentially, maybe. Guys, we'll be doing a couple more shout-outs for Suno tonight. He is 4 follows away. 1, 2, 3, 4 from his follow goal of 900 on his 1-year affiliate anniversary stream. So I will highly encourage y'all to be dropping that follow. So Pimpcat, we had some. So Pimpcat, here's the thing. I called someone to come out today, and they said, "Well, given that you've already dried out a fair bit of it, we're not going to come out," which was kind of poopy. So I called someone else, Pimpcat. They were not the national company that I called, but a local one, and they came out. They pulled up some of the carpet, and they found the little mat underneath was damp. And so, like, they're like, yeah, we need to rip up the carpet. We need to take out that mat. We got to dry everything down. And he did look at the drywall. He already found some mildew growing. And so he looked at where it needs to be cut. And he identified the species of mildew based on how it looked. He was very, very efficient. Sneaky Snoo, thank you for the follow, Sneaky Snoo. Welcome to the colony, Sneaky Snoo. So Pimpcat, he's going to write up an estimate that we can give to the insurance company. But it was, I'm glad he came out, because this other place was like, well, I don't know what you want us to do. Yeah, Big Gaming, the other guy said that he did 14 houses this week because apparently a lot of people's basements flooded over the weekend because of that rain that we also had. And he was saying that the issue is if you've already dried out things to a certain level, we probably don't need to change the carpet. And so, and like a couple of other things that we actually like stayed on it. And so it's less profitable for some of those companies to come out because it's not as much that they can charge. I know, and BitGaming, the problem, like, I also went onto the town Facebook group and asked for suggestions. And a lot of people said either the local guy that I picked or this other company that also some of our friends in chat have used, that because they're national, they have offices everywhere, right? And they'd always had all good experiences, but it was just this one was just like, they chose not to do it. I don't know, strange. So Pimpcat, hopefully they'll get me the estimate, hopefully by the end of the weekend, and maybe we can have some work done on it next week. I'm hoping, possibly. Guys, again, our friend Sunachkana, he is 4 follows away from his follow goal of 900, and today is his 1 year, hi Hugh, 1 year affiliate anniversary. Please hit the heart button right now on the top of the chat to, he needs 3 follows. He needs 3 more follows, 1, 2, 3, for him to hit his follow goal, folks. A similar situation when I tried to get my porch fixed. The job was too small for most builders. Yeah, I mean, but it doesn't look like it's too small. Like, from what the guy said, there's still a fair bit of work to do. I think he's just... I don't know what the situation was with Big Gaming. It's just probably not enough money. But yeah, guys, go check out Suno. Let's get back to the video. We'll do some more shoutouts for him later. I want to make sure he gets his follow goal tonight. I think that'd be really cool.
The fact that the 2 original embryos were of opposite sexes made this case of chimerism easy to see on the genetic level. But sometimes there's nothing obvious indicating a person might be a chimera. This story is super messed up. In 2003, a woman named Lydia Fairchild nearly lost her 4 children because DNA tests said she wasn't their mother. Now, a person inherits half of his or her DNA from each parent, so a mother and her child should be at least a 50% match. But when authorities tested DNA from her skin, hair, and saliva, it wasn't a 50% match with her kids. She shared much less than a parent should. So authorities accused Lydia of kidnapping kids that weren't hers.
Just think of this scenario. This woman actually gave birth to these kids, but because of chimerism, if you do the genetic testing, it will look like she's actually not any kind of biological relatedness to it. And people, she almost got arrested for it. So Oi, this is why, you know, when you're doing the genetic testing too in criminal cases, you have to try to be very accurate and make sure you're not doing a bad job in these testing features. He does look a little like John Knoxville. You gotta have this hair a little bit more spiked. But I have some good sleep. Sneaky Sue, and Sneaky Sue, thank you for coming on in here and joining the colony. Appreciate the heck out of you.
But then, researchers looked at cells from Lydia's cervix, and that DNA matched her children. And because of these results, the court allowed Lydia to keep her kids. Lydia was a chimera too, but in her case, 2 female embryos had fused in the womb. She was her own fraternal twin sister. And genetically, some parts of her body made her the kid's aunt.
Yeah, so Pimpcat, the study that we're talking about is with ants, actually, that they're chimeras. So male ants have 1 copy in each cell of their genome, but there's this one species of ant that, when sequenced on the organismal level, so if you put the whole organism into a machine, it looks like it has, it's diploid, meaning it has 2 copies of each chromosome, which doesn't make sense in insects, because in insects, 2 copies of a chromosome equals female, not male. And it turned out that in the cells of the animal, if they did single cell... Giraffe killer!
Galaxy.
Hi, Giraffe Killer. You're valid. You're decent. You're a great person. You inspire everyone around to be a better version of themselves. Giraffe Killer, thank you for the reset for 4 months. Folks, if you're not checking out Giraffe Killer, please go drop him that follow. He is actually a naturalist, a savior of animals. He is named Giraffe Killer because he actually dresses up as a giraffe on the African safari and fights off poachers. He does not hurt giraffes. He kills the giraffe killers. That's why he's called Giraffe Killer. He's a hero across the African savannah, a gamer extraordinaire, and one of my, how you say, Giraffe Killer?
My best friend.
One of our best friends. Hi, Giraffe Killer. How you doing? Guys, go to give Giraffe Killer that follow. My friend, welcome on in. Thank you for the resub. Appreciate the heck out of you. Giraffe Killer, we had to evident. And also, Giraffe Killer, if you type !pants.
I like your pants around your pants.
Yeah! That is our friend Plain Old Trey right there. Singing I like your pants around your pants. Yes. Giraffe Killer, just !pants whenever you need it. Or, and if you need the best friendo, !BFF. If you need it. Just if you need it. If you need it. So, Pimpcat, what is a chimera? That ant that has 2 different genetics, like in its body. So one cell type has 1 genome. The other cell type has a different genome. So the whole animal is made up of 2 different genomes. And in fact, there's a really nice figure in the paper that I think better illustrates it. This is looking at like percentage breakdown, like different parts of the body, how much of each body part has a different composition of genetics. So the purple is one kind of genome, the green is the other, and it's just a mix. So it's not within a cell, it's a mix, but between cells. That is a chimera. And there's also human chimeras as well, which is what we're talking about now. Ever better forms of those Giraffe Killer, please and thank you. If you have the opportunity to send me those, yes, please. I will not, as Big Gamey said twice today, I will not look a gift horse in the mouth. Giraffe Killer, I will not do that. If you don't mind. Again, I love your face. Guys, go follow Giraffe Killer. And also follow the person that we met Giraffe Killer through. The lovely and amazing, the breathtaking, the best hair in the business, folks. Plain Old Trey. Go follow Plain Old Trey because...
I like your pants around your pants.
I like your pants around your pants, folks. Again, welcome on in, Giraffe Killer. Pimpcat, let me know if that makes sense on the chimera explanation. This video is giving us a little bit of a look into how it happens with humans. The principle is the same as how it happens with insects, except the copy number is different. In humans, you can have a chimera, but the number of chromosomes in each cell is still 2, versus in insects, it would be 1 copy of the chromosome, but different chromosomes throughout the different cells. And so it's different flavors of chimeras in terms of numbers, but the principles, again, are the same.
Some parts of her body made her the kid's aunt, while others made them her mother. Now, these sound like 1 in a million cases, but recent research shows that chimerism is far more common than we once thought. In 2012, a group of researchers examined the brains of 59 women who had died, mostly in their 70s. They were looking for a gene that was found only on the Y chromosome, a chromosome that a biological woman's cells shouldn't even have. But they ended up finding the gene in almost 2/3 of the women's brains.
So in the women's brains, 2/3 of them had copies of the Y chromosome. And it turned out, I think they'll tell us in the video too, that actually matched with their children. They turned out they had sons, and while they were in utero, because your kids' genetics are, while they're similar to yours, it also comes from dad. That chromosome, bits of the chromosome ended up in different cells of the human body, which is quite wild that even after 9 months, you're still carrying around bits of your child genetically in your body. Which I guess mean that baby Alona is probably within Lita forever. It's kind of wild, but also cool, but also wild.
These women were chimeras. They had cells with male DNA. And that male DNA most likely came from sons the women had given birth to decades earlier. Scientists learned that during pregnancy, some cells from the fetus enter the mother's bloodstream and migrate to various organs, and they may stay there for decades, mixing with the woman's own cells. This can even occur during pregnancies that end in miscarriage or abortion. In other words, there's a good chance that your mom is a chimera, which finally explains the goat head. And if you're a mom yourself, you probably are too. A micro chimera to be exact, since you likely only have a small number of your children's cells still living inside of you. Now, carrying around your kids' cells for years on end might make you more prone to autoimmune diseases, where your immune system gets confused about which cells belong to you and start attacking your own tissues.
That's like the crazy part, I think, to NMD, is that if you have a lot of different of these cell types in your body, some are going to be dominant, right, of how many you have in terms of numbers, and eventually your immune system might think, well, one of these doesn't belong to me, I need to kill it and attack it. But by that point, those cells may have incorporated into the rest of your body. It's quite wild. Clearly it says, but this insinuate that the women tend to carry more stuff into the newborn. So Draft Killer, between the placenta, the baby, and the mother, there's blood flow going, and so there could be cells that go from baby into mom and vice versa. And so it just seems like some of those cells from baby that go into mom will stick around and have a permanent feature in the body. So that's why when they did the brain dissections of those women, they're presumably, I would probably say if all those women had kids, you'd probably be looking at 100% of them having some genetic information that doesn't belong to them. It's just they only found it in 2/3 because they were looking for Y chromosome markers. My guess is those remaining third, if they had kids, maybe had girls. And so because they were looking for something on the Y chromosome, they wouldn't have found it. But that doesn't mean that they're also not chimeras in the brain. Which is quite wild. And that's also then, presumably, you as a child are probably have some chimeraism from your mom. Because if blood flow is going from baby to mom, it also goes from mom to baby. So maybe there are some cells in you that are also not yours. It's just a very small amount of the cell type. This thing with color blindness, it tends to come through in the female more than the male. Does it? You mean the male bloodline? I thought it was more likely to be male, Draft Killer. Maybe I'm confused on that front. Maybe I have it backwards. But yet I know that is a sex-specific one. It's linked on the sex chromosomes. There are some diseases that are linked on the sex chromosomes, and there's ones that are linked on the autosomal chromosomes. Yep, okay, it is. That's right. I thought it was males. Those are autosomal diseases. If they're not linked on the X or the Y, those are the autosomes, and that's where it's linked. But then some are much more directed towards like male or female. It comes from the mother more than the father. It's stemming. The reason, so Draft Killer, is because it's coming on the X, and it's because dad doesn't give the X, dad gives the Y. So if the mutation's on the X, if you're born with 2 X chromosomes, even if you have the mutation, because it's recessive, you have one copy that's mutant, but you have one copy that's normal from dad, let's say. Then your daughter will see normal color. But if you get only 1 X, and it's from mom, and then you get the Y from dad, that X from mom has the mutation, let's say, and then you're born colorblind. And that's why, and presumably, it's because you're less likely to know that the mom has that mutation. Because if she does not colorblind, you're not you're not going to go out and test your wife to see if she has the colorblind recessive gene built in there, right? So I think that's probably why it happens that Y lineage. And I apologize, Draft Killer, for misunderstanding. That's on me, and I apologize, and I think it might be in part because...
I like your pants around your pants.
That's just one possibility. You never know.
On the other hand, if some of your organs malfunction, your child's healthy cells may actually step in and save the day.
You're calling like, Draft Killer. There was a long-standing controversy in science over color blindness. There's these things called heat maps. Let me show you what these genetic heat maps look like. Okay, Draft Killer, I'm not sure if you're red-green colorblind. You don't need to out yourself if you are or not. However, this graph was very commonly used in scientific studies, where green is down regulation of genes, so genes that are turned down relative to the control, and red is turned up to control, at least in this graph. And a lot of scientists, Draft Killer, can't see this graph. Bit gamey. Oh, bit gamey. That's not fun. So, Draft Killer, a lot of people couldn't see this graph, right? So it has green and red in there, and if you're colorblind, then there's no way of actually telling what the information here is in the graph. And so it was a relatively new thing that they had. Yes, exactly. So Draft Killer, nowadays, this is what most look like. So you have cyan and yellow. And these are much more of the modern day heat maps, so that people can actually tell the differences. Guys, Legendary Jomio is in his house. Jomio, extraordinary artist, handsome as ferret legend. Please go follow Jomio. Jomio, fun story. I went to the P.O. box twice this week, Jomio. Earlier in the week, and I went today. And I'm expecting 2 international things, actually. One from you and one from our friend Everyday Gamer M, a.k.a. Mon, a.k.a. Monique. Alright, chimeras, folks. Let's go back to chimeras.
When one woman's liver was damaged by hepatitis C, her child's cells grew a whole new chunk of liver for her.
Jomi, I love your face. I absolutely, look, I love just looking at it. Now I love even more because I can hold it and look at it. And thank you again for sending it. Far too kind, my good sir. Far too kind.
When's the last time you got your mom something that nice? Now, chimeras share their bodies with other people, but there's another way that you might share your body with different versions of yourself. In a mosaic, a single cell in one body.
Thank you, Moo. Thank you, Moo.
Body mutates and then keeps dividing, spawning a whole separate lineage of cells in that body, genetically distinct from the rest. And mosaicism can be really obvious. You ever see a tree with a branch or two that look like they don't belong? Well, in medieval Europe, people used to call these strange growths hexenbessen, witches' brooms.
Witch's broom is an odd tree growth where short branches grow in closely packed bunches from a central source. They can be a symptom of plant disease or a result of genetic mutation, a mosaic in fact. While some of them do look like brooms, many of them actually resemble nests. But keep in mind, anything odd, especially anything even vaguely resembling a human object, was at one time seen as unnatural, even supernatural. Pretty much anything weird in nature was seen as monstrous. Since witches have been associated with riding brooms since at least the 14th century, people saw these strange tree growths and gave them a name that tied the two things together. Some people even believed the mutated branches could be used by witches for shelter.
The reality is much more mundane. A few cells mutated in one part of the tree and just gave rise to a branch that looks different from the rest of the tree. In the case of the witch's broom, the mutations are harmless, but sometimes the mutated cells can cause more serious problems.
Andrew, it's like there was one with the images of Loch Ness, Andrew. You know that whole like story came that Loch Ness is a monster, right? And it's like, you know, living in the ocean or the seas and lakes and everything. It turns out most recent evidence of that image that we all see as Loch Ness is the male reproductive organ of a whale. And so it's interesting to always see from a historical perspective, like when we see something that we can't explain, how is it explained in that societal group, right? And so it's always fascinating, I think, to be like, oh, it's, you know, like even with this, like this weird and unique growth, having it. Her name is Ness. I thought it was Nessie. Or I guess that's Little Ness. Ancient religious bias is so often linked to basic scientific answers. And it's not that you can't have the two of them together, Draft Killer. It's just, or like manatees, right? Manatees are the beginnings of potentially like being like the story of mermaids. Hi, Cavalier, first-time chatter. There is a chapter about genetic sex determination in the book Superorganism, The Beauty, Elegance, and Strange, and Insight by Bert Hobler and E.O. Wilson. Indeed. And actually, I do have that book. It is still not in my possession. I'm waiting on it to be returned. But that, I love E.O. Wilson's books, and he writes with Hodobler. They're like the gold standard of ant books. Ilona is messy sometimes, Andrew. None today that I'm aware of. Tree looks like UK or Scotland. I see that, Mind Shell. How you doing, Mind Shell OGA? Welcome on in. Also, first-time chatter. We got 2 first-time chatters in here. That we get a little bit of hype for that. Welcome on. I know that's Poggers! Giraffe Killer. Giraffe Killer. Is this a type of cancer? I don't think so, Smikes. As far as I know, because it's not uncontrolled cell growth, it's just mutation that causes the growth, like a growth to look different. Versus if it was uncontrolled growth, they do get tumorous-like effects, and this to me looks different. Resident, no, Draft Killer, how dare you talk down about yourself? Part of that, I don't even know to nerf that comment, because part of it's very kind. Right, part of it was kind because welcome in. It was very kind and like welcoming into the new people, but the other half was self-deprecating. And Draft Killer, whilst I self-deprecate, so it's a little bit difficult for me to be like, oh, that, you know,
one is not tethered by
limitations.
What does that mean? Come.
NMD, sleep well. They're breathtaking. Before you go, NMD, make sure to follow our friend Sunachikana. If you're not already following Sunachikana, he is almost at his 900 follower goal. Today is his affiliate anniversary stream, and he's almost his 900 follower goal. He is 3 follows away, so please go drop him that follow and help him push them out to that front. They always ignore the knockout comment that exposes them. Sometimes, Mind Shell, it does happen. All right, let us continue, folks. And guys, go check out Suno, please. He's 3 follows away from that follow goal. Welcome in, folks. I'm the kind drunker who has questions without regard. There we go. Draft Killer. This is why you are
my best friend.
Indeed, Draft Killer.
That's what happened in the most famous case of mosaicism, a 19th century Englishman known as the Elephant Man. Born Joseph Merrick as a baby, strange outgrowth.
There's also a, I don't know if it's a musical or just a play. I think it must be a musical. It was on Broadway. It was starring Bradley Cooper, and it was about the Elephant Man. There's also a movie about it. I think there might be a couple of movies. There was a more recent, not a retelling of it, but just a patient with a similar setup. It's called elephantiasis, is the genetic disease of that.
It's appeared on his head, arm, and other parts of his body, crippling him to the point that...
Is it called Mask? Oh, okay, gotcha. Thank you, Optic. I haven't seen it. But I did hear about like that, the premise of that. We've only gone to see 2 Broadway performances, and that was not one of them. Graphic is okay, but I make the same mistake a moment to come here. But your friends are always so patiently. Aosphine, listen.
I like your pants around your pants.
Can't help but say it. Yeah, oh, is it movie? But Optic, did he not also do it on Broadway? Like there was the movie version of it, but I felt like. Oh, no, that was different. The Mask is different from the Bradley Cooper one. Gotcha. So I always come to believe this end his patience.
This is true.
Cavalier, that was perfect timing. And for you, Giraffe, it's because... Also, chat. I chased Giraffe Killer and Trey's stream. Draft Killer comes in, and there's this very rude command in Trey's stream. If you type !GK, it says that he's a bad boy. Draft Killer is. And whenever someone triggers it, I @ Draft Killer. I'm like, "You are kind, handsome, and wholesome." And he's like, "Oh no, SciAnts is here! I have to run!" And he like runs away because I'm just like following him, telling him that he's a really good person. And he's like, "No!" So if you see Draft Killer in other people's streams, make sure to do that to him, and he'll be like, "No!" It's the whole thing. Okay.
Soon, the only work available to him was serving as a circus attraction. Eventually, at age 27, Merrick's mysterious condition killed him. The doctors now believe that Merrick had Proteus syndrome.
Thank you, Ollie Robs. Thank you. That's what I say is far too kind. When I hang out in his stream, he's always very welcoming and sweet, and it's just, I just one day want to meet him and give him a hug. You know, because you wouldn't do that to anyone who isn't kind, wholesome, and loving and wonderful, right? Ollie, you wouldn't. Yeah, like what the command says that he's less than ideal and possibly potentially a poopy face. You know, that rude command cannot be true if you want to be giving this man a hug and, you know, giving him like just your heart.
A condition named after a Greek sea god who could change his shape. But the most dangerous case of mosaicism is one that's all too common: cancer. In cancer, a few cells mutate and become different from the body's normal cells.
Again, we're going a little bit rabbit holing on this from our ants, but it's the same principle of how mosaicism and chimerism work. It's cells within the body that have different genetic information. So there are two different genomes that are existing in these cell types. And for cancer, that's definitely a big component. It's actually homogeneous or heterogeneous in a tumor. So that's actually an unfortunate side effect of talking about and doing research on cancer cell lines. When you're working with cancer in a dish and you're trying to look for drugs that work on the tumors that kill them, or doing other features on those tumorigenic cells, where it gets tricky is if you're doing that and that you think it might work the same way in the body. In the body, that population of cells is going to be different. In a dish, they're all identical, but in the body, there's a bunch of different types. Versus like their genetics are different. It's all a potpourri of cells in there, and that's also Draft Killer why the drugs aren't necessarily as efficacious or as good at killing the cancer in the body versus in that dish, and that's what can yield to metastasis, right? Because again, so many of their bodies, or the cells in their bodies, are just so different.
Eventually dividing uncontrollably and growing into tumors. In most cancers, it's the body's own cells that mutate and become cancerous. But certain rare types of cancer can actually come from another individual's mutant cells. That's right, contagious chimeras. That's what happens with canine transmissible venereal tumor. A dog with this cancer develops tumors around their genitals. When this dog mates with a healthy dog, because dogs just aren't that picky, some tumor cells jump over to the healthy animal, and soon they're growing tumors on that new dog. These tumors grow in the bodies that carry them, but they didn't come from those dogs' bodies. The tumors are genetically distinct from the host. They're actually a piece of another dog that's been passed from dog to dog to dog back through time. Scientists trace them to an ancient canine who lived about 11,000 years ago, around the end of the last ice age. Yes, a piece of one dog has been alive for 11,000 years, making this tumor the oldest dog ever. Another chimeric cancer is threatening Australia's Tasmanian devils, which are now an endangered species. They pass these facial tumors through biting each other. Now, luckily,
and unfortunately, those facial tumors are being passed around, and there's like no good defense against it.
Chimeric cancers are rare, but mosaic cancers, sadly, those are anything but rare. But really, even healthy bodies are mosaics, even yours. Each of our bodies is a product of a huge number of cell divisions. Minor changes to our DNA creep in, leading to whole lineages of cells that are a little different from the rest, often in ways that we can't see. Almost all of us harbor multiple mutations, small changes in our bodies that we weren't born with. If you sequence the DNA from cells in your heart and your nose and your left toe. I bet none of them would be an exact match. We like to think of our DNA as a unique marker of our identity that is set in stone for life. For much of human history, people with genetic abnormalities were treated like monsters. But modern science has taught us that, in fact, we're not all that different from the elephant man. We're all mosaics. And the longer we live, the more versions of ourselves we become.
There's the goat as well. You think prayer could have an effect? Is there studies on prayer and cancer? So, Mind Shell, there have been some studies, not necessarily on prayer, but on what's the best, like mental standing, like the outlook that you have during the time of the disease. So I think the reason why I'm pulling that one up is because if you can have a certain mindset and a attitude during the treatments or any, like, during the progress of the disease, it can slow things down. There are actually links between emotional state as well as a disease state. So there's one called Takotsubo cardiomyopathy, or broken heart syndrome. Essentially, there is nothing wrong with you on a physiological level, except you're really sad and your heart stops working. And so that is an example of a really, like, strong connection between the brain and organs, right? And, like, the rest of your body, and, like, right? So it's, again, there hasn't been, like, what I would suggest as a well done scientific study on the power of prayer versus like disease states such as cancer. But given that there are physiological differences and similarities too between other genetic states and how that all works, like with respect to the connection between the mind and the body, I would say there's probably something there. I don't know how far you can take it, but I would say there's probably something there. So yeah, and it's just Mind Shell, like, it's hard to I think figure it out for it. Yeah, it's the study isn't necessarily done yet, but it could be done. Hi, Ristrock. No, sorry, Risto. Working on my ship, and I got Arc's print sent off to him. Nice, Risto. Which one did he pick? Guys, if you're not checking out Ristorok is a mental health chatterer who's actually going to be participating on a raid train next weekend, Risto. 3 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. My goodness gracious on that front. Please go follow Ristrock, gamer extraordinaire as well. And we'll be putting out a calendar, a shirtless calendar, benefit a nearby orphanage. Of course, Mindshell. I'm sorry that it's not a satisfactory answer. I just want to... It's one of those topics that I think there's something to it. But again, like, to get the science done in a way where it's controlled and you can see the connection between them, it just hasn't been done. Like, where... Because there's a bunch... If you look on the internet, there could be some hoodoo science. And it's just, like, the controls aren't really done well. And there's a lot of issues, like, on how the study was created. If it even is a real study. Like following... proper guidelines of how to set these things up and like how to deal with patients and everything. So it's just, that's why I hesitate to give you a full answer, but I answer it as best as I can. Yeah, but that's not to say there's nothing there. Yeah, and then exactly, brain chemistry and how that's connected to this tumor genesis. There's probably a lot of connections, Mindshell. It's just, it needs to be better done, is what I'd say. Really good photo. I was excited to it on canvas, and it's so good. Nice. Risto, you signed it, right, on this one, Risto? If I'm remembering correctly. Thank you, Big Gamey. Big Gamey's on top of it. Hold on. Okay. Light sourcing from that, working on site workers, but even then, the methods aren't 100% accurate. It's hard working with human patients to begin with, anyway, Draft Killer, because humans have so many... like environmental factors at play that also affect like your how you're gonna have a reaction with anything, and so that inherently makes humans very difficult to control. Not just like, I don't mean behavioral control, I just mean like because you've gone through things differently in life. Pine Shell, thank you for the follow. Welcome to the colony. It makes any kind of comparison different, very difficult. And it's just those variables, like, because Draft Killer, you might think if disease is only genetic, a twin, a genetically identical, not a fraternal, a genetically identical twin, you might suggest maybe will die from the same thing if it's all genetics. But there have been twin studies with twins at birth that went through most of life going through the same, like, that we thought, same things. One ends up getting heart disease and the other one ends up getting cancer at roughly the same age. So it's not that it hit one earlier, it's that they're very different. And it's all, as my show says, epigenetics, right? Like, so the environmental factors coming in. And so if two genetically identical people, right, have those differences from environment, imagine if we're not genetically identical, right? Like, you and me being compared, Draft Killer, it's such a crazy series of differences and uncontrolled variables that you have to take into account. Which again is why a lot of human studies tend to come down to meta-analyses, meaning you're comparing genomic data and trying to make a correlation between the two. And it may or may not be. Mindshell, my name is Belent. That's my actual name. But you can call me SciAnts or you can call me Belent. You can call me whatever you want to. Just don't call me Shirley. And guys, this is Risto's picture. Risto, this is a beautiful shot. I love the colors. So guys, our friend Risto also does drone photography. Call me for dinner. How you doing? How you doing, Draft Killer? How you doing? My identical twin, despite he being identical, he has more allergies. Yeah, exactly. And it's wild, right, Risto? And part of it would probably be epigenetics and how the genes are regulated. Towards Night, if you're there, OGG would be my preference, Professor Knight. OGG file. .ogg if you can, Towards Night. Yeah, so that's why mine show. But yeah, Risto is available he has beautiful pieces that are available for purchase as well. I've got one hanging on the wall of a lighthouse that he will one day sign for me. But yeah, he's got a bunch of beautiful art. The colors and textures look great. Risto, from a distance, it can look like a geological, like, depth into the ground from grass into the dirt. It also looks like it could be some kind of weird grasslands, and it could also be water, which is what it actually ends up being. And I love that about it. Guys, also love JP since we're working who's in his house. Guys, please go follow the legendary JP. Love you, JP. Please, Pimpcat, ask. Ask, Pimpcat. Ask, and you shall receive. And while Pimpcat is getting ready, I'll pull up the next paper that we're going to talk about tonight. Because this is pretty wild. And I hope y'all enjoyed the first paper. I think it's a lot of really cool... the chimerisms being used for genetic diversity in the ants that makes them so good at colonizing other places in the world is quite metal. And it's the first evidence of that. So that was the first study. And I hope y'all enjoyed it. I really liked it. I love the presence of chimeras and how they work. But having them utilized for a special, like, mating effect is quite cool, I think. Tomorrow's a big day, finally setting up my spot on the storefront. Excellent, JP. How you feeling, JP? Are you ready, my friend? Are you ready? Are you excited, JP? Are you excited, JP? I hope you're excited, JP. JP, I'm excited for you. I'm super excited from you. I'm super excited, JP. Good. Excellent. Glad to hear it, JP. It's gonna go well. I already know it, JP. I already know it. All right, Pimpcat, whenever you're ready, you can ask your question. Then we're going to go on to this topic number 2 for the night. Okay, here we go. Watching an episode of Grey's Anatomy, and this kid had RH null blood, and I've never heard of this before. How is it supposed to be 1 in 6 million people? How does it happen, and why is it so rare? So, Pimpcat, that will be a deep dive topic. That I need more time to do my research on. I want to make sure that I'm up to date with the current data and the current literature. So Pimpcat, are you part of the Discord by chance, Pimpcat? if so, there is a section on the Discord called, if you scroll down on the Discord to, it says stream resources. There is it's called things you want streamed. If you put that question in there, that would be amazing, because I do need to look it up, because the blood type data for that there tends to be changes in it, and I don't want to tell you out of date information. But if no pressure to join the Discord. If you do not want to join it, that's totally Gucci. If you rather, send me a whisper with that question, and I will look it up, and we'll have it together for a different evening. Because again, I don't want to be misleading in what I tell you, because that could be I don't want to spread misinformation. So either whisper it to me, or you can join the Discord. And no, Mindshield, no. There is no mandate to join the Discord. It's just the science continues on there. Yeah, just Pimpcat, send me the message so that I can remember to look it up. That would make all right. Ristarok, thank you for doing that. Risto has redeemed a deep dive on it. Pimpcat. So Pimpcat, I will add that to our list of things that we want streamed, and we will do a yes, it 100% works on it. Let me just grab. Let's see, okay, RH blood. Pimpcat, if you're not here when we do it, there you can check it on our YouTube. It will be on the YouTube page. So I've added it to you, Pimp. I've added it on the list, Pimpcat. We'll look it up. We'll usually do these on Thursdays. Is like the grab bag science. If you're not here, it'll be up on the YouTube, and that way you'll get the question. And so there is the YouTube page as well. So just make sure you're subbed to the YouTube. If Pimpcat would do it and you miss it and you come in, you're like, did you guys do it? I'll say yes. And we'll point you toward the video on the YouTube that's run by the lovely and amazing Debs. Yeah. But it is more fun if you're here, absolutely, Pimpcat. It's just if we plan out for it one night, we should just go ahead and run on that front. But thank you, Risto, again. Very generous, my friend, for the redeem. Folks, before we get started on this next one, I do want to give one more shout out to our friend Suno Chicano. He's having his affiliate anniversary today, and he is 2 followers away from hitting his follow goal of 900 for his first year of streaming. So if y'all aren't yet following him, please consider dropping him a follow. He's a gamer, VTuber extraordinaire, and he just needs one more follow now. Thank you, Giraffe Killer, to hit 900 followers and hitting that follow goal for him. So please consider dropping them that follow. He's one more to do it, and he'll unlock that 900 follower goal on there. Okay. So, chat. Locust cannibalism is up next. What are locusts? What do they do? And let's just get into some locust biology here for a second, folks. Locusts are quite terrifying. They're quite amazing as well. They have differences in... Awesome. Thank you, Asfin. They have two different lifestyles. They have what is called a gregarious. Yes, Mindshell. We do have a YouTube page. Here it is, Mindshell. I know he made 900. Yeah. Thank you, guys. They are. So Draft Killer, this is why they're really cool. So they are called society killers because when they fly through, they just devour everything. And the question is, how on earth do they know what to eat and what not to eat? Because they're in a feeding frenzy. They're destroying crops, everything, right, in the fields. And the question that these researchers had is why and how aren't they eating each other? Like, if they're already so wild, why does that not happen? Let's talk a little bit about locusts. Again, what's crazy is they have two different lifestyles. They have a social form, or a gregarious, where they're in groups and they have that big flight and like going through the world and like destroying everything. And then they also have a solitary stage where they're just by themselves. Oh, giraffe killer. That is not a bad hypothesis, right? You might be like, maybe they're missing the gene, right, that makes them cannibalistic. Giraffe killer, that is not a bad bet, right? Maybe that's how they just don't have the propensity for it. In fact, the giraffe killer, that is not the case. That is not the case. Gotta get to bed early. Much love. Love you, Risto. Risto, have a great day tomorrow and a great weekend, my good sir. Love your face, Risto Rock. Stay amazing, Risto.
In dreams, one is not tethered by earthly limitations.
What does that mean?
Come.
SciAnts know you. You're the cutest. To know that you deserve a Juno. You a star over here. I'll reverse the card like Uno.
You're breathtaking.
Only recently did I learn what a Juno is. I had no idea what that was about in that lyric. I just thought it sounded cool. And, I mean, it is cool, but it turns out that's like an actual thing. Very different from my original suspicions. So PimCat, it turns out that this study did not identify any genetics of why there might be some kind of cannibalistic behavior. It came down to something different. But first, let's do a little bit of background on just about locusts and why they're so wild.
The ravenous swarm stretches as far as the eye can see.
And this is exactly how we were talking about, like, all the biblical references of, like, just destroying of worlds, locusts. And even if y'all have seen... Thank you, Lady Lara Croft.
What drink?
If y'all have seen the movie Jurassic World... Dominion? No. What was the third Jurassic World movie? Dominion. No. I have no idea. Whatever the third movie was. The whole plot of it is that there's these genetically engineered locusts. And they're destroying the world. So, whatever is likely entire scientific knowledge most folks have. I mean, but Giraffe Killer, those animals... Aosin, thank you for following our friend Sunich Gano and getting him over that hump. Appreciate you, Aosin. It's like a historical account in some senses, right? Like, if you're looking at the biblical stories of how locusts did what they did, then you see that in the modern world, too. And so that's kind of how they went through and analyzed just how that world worked. And again, you never know, like, how Dominion was a third. Okay, so, like, in Dominion, in that Jurassic World movie, they also had those animals just, like, ravaging the world, right? And they were genetically engineered, but it utilized the same principle of what these animals do and how they do it. And, well, it's a little... I mean, I really didn't... full disclosure, I did not enjoy the third Jurassic World movie. I thought the final act was a big disappointment when they had this big build-up to there being so many dinosaurs. And, like, I thought it was going to be a much cooler ending. Whatever, it's fine. It's fine. It's something that, I just can't even. I just can't even with that movie. It's fine. Let's get into some locusts.
It has no commanding general or strategic plan. Its only goals are to eat, breed, and move on. A relentless advance that transforms pastures and farms into barren wastelands. These are desert locusts, infamous among their locust cousins for their massive swarms and capacity for destruction.
Draft Killer, I do have good news. They have been killed off in North America on accident. We will talk about that as well. Wondering if the rivers turn the blood was a reference to something like allergy as the red tide poisoning. Maybe PimCat. Maybe. That would be, I mean, yeah, I'm not sure. It is kind of fun to try to figure out what the references might have been towards, but sometimes I think it's very difficult to figure out because it might have been events that, like with changes in climate and whatnot, are no longer like happening now, and so it's hard to get that like the look back on and try to figure out what exactly was causing it. Can you eat locusts? So Beery, probably, but I don't know how well you can eat it. So you can eat, like Tarzan said, crickets. People eat cicadas, like during the big cicada explosion that we had a few years ago. I saw a bunch of recipes online of how to eat cicada. So I imagine you could eat these animals as well. And yes, Spike says you can't eat anything once. That's very true. That's a toxicity joke right there, folks. Don't eat toxic things. But how good they are in being like from a nutritional standpoint and just an overall that you'd want to, I am not sure on that front. What I am sure of, folks, is that you please go follow our friend Big Gaming, because Big Gaming is an amazing father, game developer extraordinaire, working on a game called Dog's Life and Homeward Hound. Please go check out the latest amazing Gaming. Love you, Bit.
But these insects aren't always so insatiable.
Saying if there's so many and they're flying everywhere. Been in a locust storm before. Oh, very cool, Birian. That's really, really cool. I mean, it's terrifying, but it's also cool. I would love to be in not a locust storm, but the butterfly migration. That's what I would like to check out. Little Salt and Pepper, no Big. Ah, Big Gaming! I love your face, Big Gaming. I love your face. Little Pepper and Salt No Biggie YouTube channel Snakes actually discovery 8 cockroaches. Oh, gotcha, Tarzan. I really don't like cockroaches. Big Gaming is lovely, Traveler World, but in fact, Traveler World, I would argue this whole community is pretty awesome. Bit, are we gonna see you again soon? I miss you.
In fact, most of the time, desert locusts are no more dangerous than garden variety grasshoppers. So what does it take to turn these harmless insects into a crop-consuming plague?
So this is the switch between gregarious or social to being solitary animals. Hopefully on Monday, sweet. Bit, I miss you. I miss you, Big Gaming.
Desert locust eggs are laid in the damp depths of desert soil, in arid regions stretching from North Africa to South Asia. During the dry weather typical in these ecosystems, desert locusts live a solitary lifestyle. Adolescent hoppers will spend a few lonely weeks foraging for plants before growing wings, reproducing, and dying. But when a region receives an abundance of rain, the scene is set for a startling transformation.
And Giraffe Killer, this would be the correct species for the biblical plagues as well. Because you'd see, right, it's the correct like setup for everything, right? So it's on that front. It is a crazy animation, right? But pretty cool. Rain time, Giraffe Killer. Rain time, yeah, yeah.
Increased moisture supports more vegetation for newly hatched hoppers to eat, leading large groups to feed in close proximity. The frequent
they're related to grass. There is a genetic relation to grasshoppers, but the way they behave when they're not in the social state is like grasshoppers. They are not going to be like destroying things on that front.
Contact stimulates their leg hairs, triggering the release of a hormone that causes
kind of girl 222. Thank you for the follow. Welcome on into the colony.
Them to actively cluster even closer. Gluttonous crowds of locusts produce huge amounts of poop, which carries a pheromone that furthers their transformation. The hopper's diet shifts to include plants with toxic alkaloids. Soon, the locusts take on a striking pattern that warns predators of their newly poisonous nature.
So, Beery, you were asking if you can eat locusts? When they switch to this gregarious state, you don't want to eat the locusts.
Smaller groups merge into bands of millions, which mow down virtually all plant life in a kilometer-wide swath. Roughly every week, they shed and expand their exoskeletons, growing to roughly 50 times their hatching weight.
And this shedding of the exoskeleton isn't present in all animals. It's like a lot of insects don't have this shedding in the growth. Like ants, once they've hatched once, that's their final size, versus very different in the locusts.
In just 1 month, finally, the metamorphosis is complete. The adults beat their translucent wings and take flight as a full-fledged locust swarm. In this gregarious phase, these long-winged, brightly colored creatures appear so different from their solitary counterparts that they were long thought to be a separate species.
That's why, actually, PimCat, they used to think that it was like a grasshopper and a different species. The cicada, yeah, giraffe killer. Yep, so they release a chemical. That chemical actually changed hormones in their brain called neuroparsin. And their levels of neuroparsin dictate the social state. The solitary ones have high levels of neuroparsin, versus the very social ones have lower levels of neuroparsin. It seems like that chemical that makes them swarm lowers that neuropeptide in their brain, furthering the fact that creating that swarming behavior, which is quite wild, right? And actually, that's going to be in part of that cannibalistic behavior as well. Is going to be in part chemically mediated.
A typical swarm contains more locusts than there are humans on the planet, covering hundreds of square kilometers in a dense cloud. At these numbers, desert locusts easily overwhelm their predators. A large swarm can match the daily food intake of a city of millions. And flying with the wind, the insect invasion can travel up to 150 kilometers a day. This living tornado can also cross large bodies of water. In 1988, a swarm even managed to traverse the Atlantic Ocean. The locusts likely formed rafts.
Andrew, thank you, Lord. That was for you, Andrew. Why don't we hear about this more? Giraffe killer. Sorry, I got excited. Ooh. In part because they've been wiped out of North America. That's one of the big reasons why. What did they eat when they crossed the ocean? They started attacking.
What drink?
They started attacking the local fauna when they landed. They're not very picky, unfortunately.
To rest at night before fueling up in the morning with a nourishing breakfast of their dead kin. While flying over land, they seek out moist soil to lay eggs. Swarming mothers transfer their gregarious condition to their offspring, making it likely that the next generation will form another swarm. This means that while an individual desert locust lives only 3 months, a plague can last up to a decade. The potential for a years-long plague isn't unique to desert locusts, but the region they inhabit makes the prospect particularly deadly. Their habitat spans some of the world's poorest countries, largely populated by people who grow their own food. By consuming crops and pastures, these insects directly endanger 10% of humanity. Fortunately, a desert locust plague,
a decade even, Lady Lara Croft,
doesn't last forever. When a wet period
Yellow alert period
Whatever.
ends, vegetation becomes scarce and egg-laying conditions decline.
So this is what gets it out of Lady Lara Croft. So as soon as that time of plenty, which could be destroyed by the locust, goes away, that hormone goes back up and they switch to a solitary lifestyle. And then it's just, again, until everything starts coming back, they stay solitary, and then they'll go into that gregarious phase and start like swarming again. So it's an insane balancing act, because you want there to be a lot of food for people who need food to live, right, that are growing. But if the land is doing really well, it's more likely to have these locust plagues happen. Do grasshoppers eat crops too? I think, PimCat, they can, but they also will eat other kinds of grasses that aren't like necessarily like our own crops. And there's also not that many of them. So if they start eating some, I mean, they'll also eat weeds. They're a less discerning species. And I think the pesticides work pretty well on them, versus it's much harder to get it to work on these locusts.
As existing swarms die off, new hatchlings spread out in search of food, creating enough distance to prevent solitary locusts from transforming. Human intervention can also help. Researchers use satellite imagery to identify regions at risk of becoming locust hotspots and alert local governments. While most countries fight back with chemical insecticides, some regions have found success using fungal diseases that are lethal to locusts but safe for people and the environment.
And actually, the paper we're going to be talking about is a new way for it to kill them. So there is resistance, Lady Lara Croft, unfortunately. If you're using insecticides, unless you kill every single one of them the same way with bacteria, some might survive, and those that survive might be okay with that kind of insecticide. They might be resistant to it. And then their genetics spread, and now you're left with a population that's resistant. So this new study, Lady Lara Croft, is utilizing their own genetic information against them. And so hopefully there is no resistance to it. We'll talk about it, don't worry.
Unfortunately, other modern practices are exacerbating the threat. Fields densely packed with a single crop are like a table set for locusts.
And fungal diseases do change in different environments affected by like humidity. But Beery, they use ones that are particular to that region of the world. Is there a natural predator to the locust? I think travel the world, there are predators for them, but when they go into this swarm state, like the birds and other creatures that eat them, they don't want to be eaten because it actually switches. They become toxic, and so they're no longer being eaten when they're in that social state. And so while there is a natural predator present, like birds and like even small mammals might eat them, as soon as they're switched to that highly social state, they're toxic, and so those predators don't eat them anymore. We will Pendrake. We'll be going to that next on what wiped them out in North America. Always travel the world.
And erratic weather caused by climate change makes swarms harder to predict. If we plan to discourage lonely locusts from becoming catastrophic crowds, humans need to cut carbon emissions, rethink our agriculture, and generally reconsider our own ravenous appetites. Speaking of those appetites, what if we just ate the locusts?
Beery had that question. But let's move on now to the next point, which Pendrake just brought up, about the loss of these animals in North America. Here we go. We're ready. I got you, Pendrake.
Of SciShow. Go to brilliant.org/SciShow to check out their course on solar energy.
Flamethrowers and gas.
Locusts are an agricultural menace. Their swarms pose a huge risk to crops on almost every continent. In fact, beginning in October 2019, massive swarms have been damaging crops in East Africa, the Middle East, and Southeast Asia. But notice we said almost every continent. And
why has he got a Twitch shirt? I've never noticed that before. That's the last option, eating them. Lady Lara Croft, listen. There is no reason we shouldn't be able to eat bugs, but I just have my own mental block about eating them. And I know it's a cultural thing in part, and for me it's also a texture thing, because they've said that if we just ate insects like for protein, that would solve a lot of hunger issues. But yeah, I'm right there. I shouldn't be Lady Lara Croft. I should be like, no, we should be totally eating them. But I'm like, when we ate them, I ate some mealworms for our 1,000 follower celebration stream last April, and it was so bad. It was so bad. Yeah, so the crickets got stuck in my teeth and like their little legs, and it was icky on its own. But then the mealworm itself wasn't that bad, as they put flavoring salts on them, and the flavoring salt tasted terrible. Like Lita even licked some of the dust, and she was like, "Oh, that is awful." And they also, chat had me put it on a pizza. Yeah. Barbecue is amazing, Andrew. When you come and visit me soon, we'll make such a barbecue. Andrew, we'll get steak, we'll get pork, we'll get vegetables. No fish, because when Jimmy's coming, Jimmy hates fish and doesn't like seafood, so we won't have any seafood. But we'll have burgers, hot dogs, both real and vegetarian for those who like that kind of stuff. We'll toast the buns, Andrew, because you gotta have toasted buns on the barbecue, right? And then, it'll corn, Andrew, it'll be delicious. It'll be so much fun. Crickets and cats throw them all. Never tried them, but they are salt and vinegar, so never say never. I've tried them because Unofficial Soup has given us some. The only thing that I do not like that they the texture and they get caught between your teeth. Flavor wise, it was not bad. It just it was the texture. And yeah, they're counted as protein. It's just a sack of protein, Lady Lara Croft. It's like that's all that is. And you streamer. Big Gamey, do you know how some people have that Bean Boozled challenge? Right, where you flick this spinning wheel, and wherever the arrow lands, it lands on like a bean that's either like blueberry flavored or liver or what have you. Yeah, we have something like that. But what bug will Palint eat? And we flick the wheel, and then it's like, oh, he's eating a mealworm today. Or, oh, a scorpion. Yeah. Andrew, I want to watch Snowpiercer, but I have not yet. That's the one with Captain America, if I'm not mistaken. I need to essentially watch that, but I knew that it was not one for Lita to watch, and so that's why we haven't seen it yet. But it does look interesting. Crickets for Crunch. Oh, yeah. Sequels. No, wait. What? No. Not officially, right? I don't.
You don't understand. You don't understand. If you understood, you wouldn't understand.
I'm wearing the Jern shirt. I have to do that, Okay, let's see what we killed off the North American one. Charlie and the Great Glass Elevator. That I don't know about either, Smikes. I know the original Charlie and Chocolate Factory was pretty choice, and then the Johnny Depp one freaked me out. Like, it just didn't have any appeal. It just wasn't like that whimsical whirl that was in the original. I just felt it's not as fun, Word tracks are magic. I'm not sure, yeah. Chris 5-year-old loves that. Look, I think it might be a generational thing, Smikes. I have no problem with Johnny Depp. The characters just didn't resonate. I felt like it was just, I don't know, whatever. I'm weird. It's fine. Everything's fine.
Antarctica is safe, that's no surprise, but so is North America. But that hasn't always been the case. Over a century ago, North America's big locust swarms vanished, and we have a few ideas about why. First, what is a locust? Scientifically, it's a grasshopper. Most of the time. See, the species we know as locusts usually live as normal-looking grasshoppers, carrying out solitary lives in the brush. However, some species, like the desert locust, are really sensitive about how many other individuals are around them. When their population swells to a certain size, either the sight and smell of other locusts or the feeling of other grasshoppers jostling against them triggers a change in their appearance and behavior, sometimes within hours. Instead of avoiding each other, the locusts start to band together and move as a group, flying long distances and eating everything in sight. And the North American species, known as the Rocky Mountain locust, could do this too.
Actually, it's a pretty cool study when they're doing the tracking behavior of these individuals. This tracking signaling has gotten better and better, where it gets like the individuals that can be tracked, which is really, really cool. Of course, Mom Boss Lady, I said hi. Twitch Gator price is so soft and comfy. Yeah, Lady Lara Croft, absolutely. Great, hope we don't make little AI locusts. Possibly Beery. Locust just needs to go to a convention. Exactly, Nye. Going to the convention for them, and then they start eating everything.
It's said that a swarm could be 1.5 kilometers high and cover an area of 330,000 square kilometers, roughly the size of the state of Colorado, and could travel more than 200 kilometers a day. Until, all of a sudden, the locusts disappeared. In the 1880s,
So Pendrake, not all grasshoppers can become this gregarious group like that we see here. So it's not all of them. It's just certain species are able to do that. So you probably still, I see grasshoppers still too, but those don't have that ability to transform into that social group. It's a new Colorado. No!
The locust population crashed. That sort of thing happens.
Close to 100. Mom boss lady, how dare.
Except the locusts failed to bounce back. The last living specimen was collected in Manitoba in 1902. And for more than a century, we've been trying to figure out how a species could go from swarms the size of an entire state to gone without a trace. A couple of explanations have been proposed, like maybe what we'd thought of as one species, the Rocky Mountain locust, was really just the migratory phase of some other species of grasshopper that's still around. However, genetic testing of preserved specimens and other analyses have indicated that they probably were a separate species. Others have suggested that it might have been related to other large-scale ecological changes, like the near-total loss of bison. But one idea that's gotten a lot of attention is a hypothesis proposed in 1990. The idea is that despite their massive numbers, the locusts had a critical weak point in their life cycle. Field work done by entomologists all the way back in the 1800s suggests the Rocky Mountain locust had a kind of home base. They could survive in places outside these zones, but they wouldn't stay. Even though the locusts could range across vast distances, they'd always return to their so-called permanent zone along the mountains, chiefly because that's where they would breed.
So similar to how the monarch butterflies always travel back to a particular breeding site, same things with the locusts. They'd also be coming back to particular breeding sites, and that's also really cool from like a learning and memory perspective.
In particular, this region contained a number of scattered valleys, separated by inhospitable mountains, deserts, or forest, where the conditions were just right for females to lay their eggs. And they were very picky about exactly where: soft soil near rivers or in floodplains. This might have been for a couple reasons. Developing grasshopper eggs need a certain amount of moisture to grow, for instance. Also, the area around those riverbanks was more reliably lush and full of vegetation compared to the more arid surroundings, meaning plenty of food. This pickiness isn't unusual among locusts today, and it had been working for Rocky Mountain locusts for countless generations, until Western colonizers moved into these valleys. They brought with them a couple of key environmental changes that may have spelled doom for the locusts. Farmers' plows and the hooves of ranchers' cattle could have destroyed eggs or exposed them to the sun and wind. Logging, mining, and the extermination of local beaver populations may have increased flooding as well. It's unlikely that every single nest was destroyed, but it may have been enough to disrupt what's known as the metapopulation. A metapopulation refers to a larger collection of populations that interact. They're all part of the same species, but physically separated from each other. If each little population of locusts is like a city or a town, then the metapopulation would be the locust nation in this analogy. During the good times, if one local group died off due to an accident or disease, that was okay. New locusts from other nearby populations would quickly move in and repopulate the area in something called the metapopulation rescue effect.
These are also, these little circles, I don't know why, this is an aside because of a terminology, and this has stuck with me for some weird reason. Each one of those little populations are called patches. And I know this because the professor who taught me this made me very angry, because he made me hate ecology. And but the only thing he could talk about was patches. We had 10 lectures from him about patches, and it just drove me up the wall. But I still remember it. Patches.
This only works as long as the network of local populations are well connected. The more fragmented the network becomes, the more perilous the situation, especially for small, picky, boom and bust style organisms like locusts. Ultimately, the farmers and ranchers probably didn't kill off every last locust, but the changes they brought made sure they couldn't recover either. And then it was just a matter of time. Within a couple of decades, the species was gone. At least, we're pretty sure they are. In the end, it's not clear what we lost as a result of the locust's extinction. It's been suggested that they may have had some important ecological role, like helping move nutrients through the environment. There are plenty of other grasshoppers in North America, including some species that can swarm and migrate, or that threaten crops, though not nearly to the same extent. But when we talk about the species disrupted by the colonization of the North American West, alongside the bison and passenger pigeon, we might want to include the Rocky Mountain locust. If you liked this story about the complex systems created by life on Earth, you might also like learning about the power behind it all, the sun.
Fair enough. So that's why the locusts are gone from North America, which is, quite fascinating to sometimes see. Like here is also, we have a video of how these locusts look. So these are, again, the desert locusts, but seeing how they actually behave, like if you're in a swarm. always like the visual of, you know, how these even look. Just millions of these animals.
There is no other species on the planet that responds as quickly and as dramatically to the good times as the desert locust. Eggs that have remained in the ground for 20 years begin to hatch.
That is our friend, Sir David Attenborough. Imagine his mics if we one day ever get him on the stream. I'd probably cry. In a good way. And what's crazy is that, Gwen, it's a neuropeptide in the brain that changes levels. It goes from high levels, making them less than social, to then low levels, to making them more social. And that's in part moderated by density. So how close they are to each other. Like, it's a wild and also elegant system. Hi, Mad Chef! Mad Chef! Welcome on in. Happy Friday to you, Mad Chef. Mad Chef, do you have...
I like your pants around your pants.
How you doing, Mad Chef? Welcome on in. Welcome on in, Mad Chef. All right. Yes, Mom Boss Lady told us about the cats, if that's what you're talking about. All right, let's continue. Mad Chef, we're talking about this really cool study for Science News Friday about locusts. That was Trey. We do have a Trey sound alert. And also, Mad Chef, because you know Trey, that makes you... What?
My best friend.
My best friend. Mad Chef. Well, come on in. Good to have you here.
The young locusts are known as hoppers, for at this stage they're flightless. They find new feeding grounds by following the smell of sprouting grass. Normally, it takes 4 weeks for hoppers to become adults, but when the conditions are right, as now, their development switches to the fast track.
Guys, let's go check out Mad Chef, by the way. Go check out Mad Chef.
As the vegetation in one place begins to run out, the winged adults release pheromones, scent messages, which tell others in the group that they must move on.
It's quite beautiful, right? If it was not just a nightmare fuel flying in the air.
And when groups merge, they form a swarm. An adult locust eats its entire body weight every day, and a whole swarm can consume literally hundreds of tons of vegetation. They have to keep on moving. The swarm travels with the wind. It's the most energy-saving way of flying. Following the flow of wind means that they're always heading toward areas of low pressure, places where wind meets rain and vegetation starts to grow. As they fly, swarms join up with other swarms to form gigantic plagues several billion strong and as much as 40 miles wide. They will consume every edible thing that lies in their path.
Me too, Lady Lara Croft.
This is one of planet Earth's greatest.
The cicadas, though, are fascinating on their own as well, because they actually don't have their defense. They get eaten by everything, Lady Lara Croft. Their defense is to have so many of them that they're reproductively successful and they move on with life. Like they might, they born, live, mate, die, and that's that.
Spectacles. It's rarely seen on this scale, and it won't last long. Once the food has gone, the steady roar of a billion beating locust wings will once again be replaced by nothing more than the sound of the desert wind.
And so this is where Lady Lara Croft, the researchers' questions came in, that we were talking about the original paper, is there's so many in here. There's millions upon millions upon millions of locusts here swarming. They need a lot of food. If they run out of food, why don't they eat each other? Now, Lady Lara Croft, hi, Evil Patty Mac, welcome on in. Lady Lara Croft, you might be like, that's a kind of a crazy and a little bit of a dark piece of science to be asking, but I think it makes sense to ask. Like, if they need so much food, and the only thing that's left is themselves, why don't they eat each other? And let's just quickly touch on cannibalism in the animal kingdom, and then I will give you the answer. Someone say either Gucci's now time to go to sleep. Towards night, were you able to send it by chance as a .ogg file? I saw you send an MP3. I don't know what the other one is that you sent. If you're able to send it as an OGG, that would be incredible. If not, I will we'll send it to Smikes and he'll fix it. So we're just gonna quickly talk about cannibalism in other animals. No, you're fine. Towards we'll convert it, or Andrew can convert it. All the people can convert. We have fancy people here. When I convert it, it's very silly. I'm gonna nerf that comment. Towards, thank you for sending me a Gucci, by the way. Sleep well, Towards Night. Sleep well, Professor Knight. Love you, Professor Knight.
In dreams, one is not tethered by earthly limitations.
What does that mean?
Come.
Sleep well, tactics. Sleep well, tactics. Love your face tactics. Love you, face tactics. Okay, let's go over the cannibalism in the animal kingdom, and then I'll go over the answer. Hi, Student Chicano! Congratulations, Student Chicano, on 900 followers, Student Chicano!
There's five Kevins.
Hi, Humble. Guys, also go check out Humble John, maker and graphic extraordinaire. Student Chicano, congratulations, Student Chicano, on 900 followers. Guys, there's the man of the hour. Got 900 followers today on the affiliate anniversary. Congratulations, Student Chicano. I'm looking forward to your co-stream with Jimmy B of cooking together or something there. Something. Welcome on in, Suno. Love your face, Suno. Love your face, Student Chicano. Alright, so a quick look.
In the deserts of the American Southwest, spadefoot toad tadpoles hatch in tiny oases. Until they develop into toadlets, they can't survive outside of water. But these ponds are transient and quickly evaporate. The tadpoles are in a race against the clock to grow up before their nurseries disappear. So nearly overnight, some of the brood explode in size. They use their jack-o'-lantern teeth and huge jaw muscles to devour their smaller pond mates. Nourished by this extra fuel, they develop quicker, leaving the pond before it can dry out.
And again, with the locusts, we wonder why don't they do this as well? If they're already so ravenous and they need so much food, why aren't they eating each other?
The spadefoot toad is far from the only animal to eat members of its own species as a normal part of its life cycle. All of these animals do. If that surprises you, you're in good company. Until recently, scientists thought cannibalism was a rare response to starvation or other extreme stress. Well-known cannibals like the praying mantis and black widow spider were considered bizarre exceptions, but now we know they more or less represent the rule. While it may seem counterproductive,
so they're immune to each other's within species toxicity, Pendrake. So that, because they have that toxin in their own body, so if they eat another member of the colony, that would be the same. It's not going to affect them negatively because they're already used to that toxin. Live not long enough to get degenerative brain disorders. For the insect spikes, usually in the wild they don't live long enough to get degenerative brain disorders. If you keep them in the lab and you try to like baby them along into old age, they will start showing those signs of degenerative. Like they'll have actually holes in their brain start forming, which is actually happens like on the physiological level in humans as well and others. Cannibalism in mammals. I'm not connecting the two. I'm so sorry, Smikes. Sorry. Can you please rephrase?
For members of the same species to eat each other, cannibalism can promote the survival of the species as a whole by reducing competition, culling the weak, and bolstering the strong. Some species, like the spadefoot toad, cannibalize in response to environmental pressures. Their situation is precarious, but cannibalism for them isn't a last-ditch attempt to avoid starvation.
Oh, if a human eats bad things happen with... If a human eats... Oh, I gotcha, Smikes. I gotcha. So they should be interacting with each other all the time within that swarm. So the question is, so we're just talking about, first of all, cannibalism in the animal kingdom, and then I'll give you all the answer as to why they don't eat each other. Is now for a 13-hour workday about to crush a burrito? What kind? What is in the burrito? Is it chicken? Is it pork? Is it beef? Is it veggie? Are there fajita veggies in there? Or do you have some salsa on it? Is there sour cream? Is there a guac? I have so many questions about your burrito. I just hope that there's no beans. I hope there's no locusts in there either. I mean, you can have beans, Hakuda. I really don't like beans on a personal level. I just wouldn't want to subject you to beans.
Rather, it's a way to more quickly outgrow a stage where they're especially vulnerable.
Surf and turf. Oh my god, carne asada shrimp. Oh my god, Hakuna. Listen, I had the best surf and turf burrito in Arizona when I went for a scientific trip to collect samples. Oh my god. Hakuna, actually, this burrito place had top shelf burritos. I actually got 2 of them one night. I got one of those surf and turf and I got a different one. Could not eat them both. But it was so cheap and so delicious that I just had to give it a try. And it was so tasty. So I'm very jelly. Very jelly. Bon appetit, my friend. Bon appetit. It was like $4, Gwen, and it was this beast of a burrito. Like, it was like there was no sense in me buying 2 because it was visibly I could not have eaten it. Yes, prion disease, Smikes had asked. So cannibalism can result in prion disease. Prion are proteins that have a prion domain. Prion domains on a protein means that it allows the proteins to stick together like glue. And a lot of proteins have prion domains. It's just prion disease. Gotta take out my context? No worries, hard show. Prion disease are when in your brain these proteins aggregate and it causes like shutdown of regions of your brain, which eventually leads to death. When we eat raw meats, there's the possibility of being prion disease in there. That was something with mad cow disease, where they said, do not eat raw beef because you might get these diseases and you might jump species, and it's just the aggregation of these proteins and it can lead to death. In some of these animals that are eating each other, it seems like that prion disease is not a factor to deal with, even though there's just that certain strain of prion is not something that they have in their brains and their nervous system. We think it's a difference in how the nervous systems work between these different animals, but in order to fully demonstrate that, I would have to say you'd want to introduce the human prion-like protein into the brains of these animals and see after they eat each other if you would get that disease or not. So it's still a hypothesis at this point, Smikes, but prions exist in nature. The proteins, regular old proteins, have prion domains. Again, that just means they stick together without being pathogenic. And then there's the ones that can be pathogenic. So it's a really unique interaction of proteins and their different regions and how they work. Thank you, Smikes.
Vulnerable to predation or dangerous environmental conditions. Other species, including many fish, indiscriminately cannibalize each other during foraging behavior. Fish produce large numbers of tiny young, and adults exhibit about as much individual recognition of their offspring as humans do for a handful of raisins. Fish eggs, larvae, and juveniles are easily available, nutrient-rich meals, and with thousands of eggs in a clutch, plenty are still available to hatch after the adults have snacked. Baby fish aren't just at risk of being cannibalized by adults. Siblings eat each other too. Sand tiger shark eggs develop and hatch inside their mother's oviducts at different times. When the hatchlings run out of yolk from their own eggs, they eat the other eggs and hatchlings until one baby shark from each oviduct remains. When they emerge, the young sharks are well-nourished, experienced predators who stand a better chance of surviving. Even when they aren't consumed for nutrition, young animals are especially vulnerable to cannibalism. Hamsters, rats, and other rodent mothers will eat some of their young if they're sick, dead, or simply too numerous to feed. In other mammals, including bears and lions, males will kill offspring sired by another. That's because childless females become receptive to mating more quickly than if they were caring for a cub. Rather than waste nutritious meat, the males then eat the dead cubs. Meanwhile, cannibalism is less common in birds than in other groups, but certain species will eat diseased or dead hatchlings as a way of disposing of the bodies before they can attract maggots. When adults eat each other, males are cannibalized more often than females, usually during mating, and generally because they're smaller. Male Australian redback spiders mate with much larger females. Rather than scrambling away after mating, the tiny male does a somersault, bringing his abdomen into contact with his mate's mouthparts. The female showers him with enzyme-rich gut juice and consumes his abdomen. Males not killed in the initial mating crawl back into the fray, often half-eaten, to mate again, after which they're dispatched to the spider pantry. So not only does the male provide the female with his sperm, but he also provides her with a nutritious meal to better ensure that she'll survive to pass on his genes. All in all, it's clear that cannibalism is as much a part of life in the animal kingdom as other, better recognized behaviors. As we sink our teeth into the evidence of cannibalism in nature, we might ask ourselves, what else have we missed by applying human standards to the natural world? Interested in learning more?
Which is a great point to bring back the paper. Given how much locusts need to eat and want to eat, why don't they eat each other? So this study did a process called mass spectrometry, which is looking at the different odorants that are produced by these animals. And they looked at both the gregarious state, which is when they're flying around actively and social, and when they're solitary. And they found there's an odorant that appears when they're in that social state that's not present in the solitary state. And so they had to question, like, all right, what happens if we take this away? Like, why? What is it? It's a specific compound. It's called phenylacetonetriol. And again, it's only produced in those crowded conditions. They found out the genome is sequenced and you can make a mutant using CRISPR. So that's genetic engineering to remove a particular gene, so it's not going to produce this odor anymore. When they did that, they found that the locusts actually started eating each other in the group setting. So it turns out that an odorant is preventing them from eating each other and just eating everything else in sight. As soon as you take away that odorant, these animals, they don't care, and they will eat each other. Siblings will be eating each other. Non-related individuals will be eating each other. There is no discrimination, they found, for any kind of other genetic propensity. Like, is it only to protect your siblings from eating you and not, or non-siblings or whoever? No, it seems to be just a general signal of, I'm a locust, don't eat me. And as soon as you get rid of that odor, they start eating each other. And they will start to decimate their own population. So what was really cool was, not only did we learn about swarming behavior and how that works, and again, additional changes that happen in these individuals, the researchers went on at the end of the paper to suggest that this could be a way to control their population. So instead of having, bug like spray where we're killing the insects, it could be a form of genetic biocontrol, where we can turn off this gene in groups of already existing animals, and maybe then encourage them to eat each other to shut down these swarms. So it's using their own biology against them, and that's why Lady Lara Croft, maybe they wouldn't then become resistant to it, because you're not giving them a drug that there might be some genetic variants that they'll be resistant to. Instead, you're just turning off an existing gene in their bodies that make them be eaten by each other. It's wild. It's quite amazing. They haven't been able to identify what a molecule that they could use in like a naturally existing population. They say that there's two probably approaches they can do. They can do either like some kind of RNAi, so RNA interference to turn off the genes in a swarm by using a spray. That has been shown to work in other insects by just feeding them via like sugar water and the small molecule. Or instead of spraying insecticide, they can spray an antagonist of this molecule, meaning it'll outcompete the molecule that they're producing, and it will yield the opposite result. So that is a way of, it's a genetic biocontrol mechanism that they're utilizing and trying to induce in these animals, which I think is quite remarkable. So I hope y'all thought it was kind of cool too. It not only has fundamental locust behaviors that we're learning about. Again, they're cool animals because of the switch from social to asocial or solitary yields different effects in their genetics, one of which is this odorant that prevents them from eating each other, which, as we found, cannibalism can be beneficial if there's food scarcity. And given that, you know, they go from grouped living to solitary based on density and the amount of food available, it seems like it would make genetic sense to have the ability to regulate wanting to eat each other, and having it through a genetic means is all the cooler. So I hope you all enjoyed that. That was the second news story of the night. Chat, we've gone through 2 news stories tonight. We talked about the crazy ants and the chimerism that goes on within their bodies, as well as cannibalism and the chemical defense of cannibalism in locusts. So that is 2 science news stories, folks. And I think there might be a good place to wrap up tonight. What do y'all think? 3 subject. What was the third, Kai? Kai, what was the third? That was 2. 2 papers. In my mind, Kai. Oh, 3 because you bet 3.